Chapter 502. Ao Run hid in the underwater cave, and there was endless fear in the depths of his eyes. Summoning the wind and summoning the rain was the magical power of the dragons, and it had never been taught to outsiders. How did this person learn it? What frightened him the most was not that this human knew the magical power of the dragons. His intuition told him that this person had learned it from him. Without using any incantations or gestures, this person could perfectly replicate this great magical power after watching him perform it 3 times. This incredible ability made him feel fear from the bottom of his heart. This was too strange. Driven by this fear, he did not want the beauties anymore, nor did he want the demonesses he had taken in before. He just wanted to escape along the waterway. However, just as this thought arose in his mind, the river water around the cave suddenly became shallow. At first, the cave was more than 30 meters below the surface of the river. Soon it became 15 meters, then 20 meters. In a few breaths, the eaves of the cave were out of the water. After a few more breaths, the river water around the cave was sucked dry, leaving only a wet mark under Ao Run's feet. At some point, a transparent giant bell fell into the Li River and covered the entire cave. The river water flowed past the 2 sides of the giant bell, and the cave that was covered by the bell became a vacuum. A figure descended from the sky and landed in front of Ing Xian and Ting Xian. Seeing that the 2 women were safe and sound, Li Mu was finally relieved. Ting Xian hugged Li Mu's arm with one hand and pointed at Ao Run with the other. She cried, "We were already at the East Sea, but he stopped us and forced us to marry him." Boohoo! Li Mu patted her hand and said, "Don't worry. I'll avenge you." Ao Run had no fighting spirit at all. His body shook and turned into a white flood dragon. He wanted to break through the bell and escape. However, with a buzz, he was bounced back by the bell wall. Li Mu flew up, and the Dao bell suddenly shrank. The powerhouses of the East County and the 2 sisters passed through the bell and appeared outside. Only Li Mu and Ao Run were left inside the bell. Li Mu stretched out his hand, and a whip appeared in his hand. Swoosh! With a flick of his wrist, a whip shadow tore through the air towards Ao Run. Ao Run was extremely confident in his own body. He didn't pay any attention to it. He was thinking of a way to escape from the bell, and allowed the whip to land on his body. His body did not feel much pain, but when the golden whip shadow landed on his body, the shadow of a flood dragon was knocked out of Ao Run's body. That was his demon soul. The flood dragon was startled for a moment. Then fear appeared in its eyes. Just as it was about to return to its body, it suddenly felt extreme danger. It glanced over and saw a small illusory sword condense above the head of the person opposite it. His intuition told him that this small sword would take his life. The flood dragon's spirit floated in the air. Without hesitation, it bent its lower body as if it was kneeling. It nodded its head repeatedly and said in fear, "Spare me, spare me. I am willing to serve you as my master. Please spare my life." Li Mu didn't make a move right away. He was considering whether it was better to keep a flood dragon as a servant or to refine its corpse. The disciples of the corpse sect had refined demons and humans, but they had never refined a flood dragon. Chun Shi and the others would definitely be interested in this project. Ao Run had already sensed that the human opposite him had bad intentions. He immediately said, "Master, you are not good at fighting in the water. In the future, I can fight in your place. I am very fast. You can also use me as a mount. You won't have to worry about traveling." It had to be said that this flood dragon had a strong desire to live. In 2 simple sentences he had clearly stated his value. Li Mu was indeed not good at fighting in the water. Not only him, but all humans and demons on land were not good at fighting in the water. The water was the world of the water. Fighting in the water with the water was a very unwise choice. One couldn't always think of drawing water first. As for mounts, under normal circumstances, Li Mu's speed was not as fast as that of a flood dragon. Although the teleport talisman could greatly increase speed, the higher the level of the Fulu, the more expensive the talisman material needed. It was okay to use it once or twice, but Li Mu couldn't afford to use the Fulu every time. The spirit boat that the Empress lent him was fast. It could be called the Ferrari of spirit boats. However, it belonged to the Empress. It was also precious to 7th-level cultivators. It was the Empress' personal flying tool. The Empress only had one. Li Mu could borrow it in an emergency, but he couldn't just take it for himself. With a flood dragon as a mount, he wouldn't need to use any spiritual stones or mana. Li Mu had to admit that he was tempted by this flood dragon. He looked at Ao Run and said, "Hand over a part of your soul." Ao Run was overjoyed when he heard this. He separated a small flood dragon soul from his demon soul's forehead and slowly flew to Li Mu. To a cultivator, it was extremely easy to kill someone with a strand of hair, a drop of essence blood, or a fragment of soul. Since Li Mu possessed a fragment of the flood dragon's soul, he had the power to kill him. Ao Run's demon soul returned to his body. He knelt on one knee and saluted Li Mu. "Greetings, master." He was very unwilling, but there was nothing he could do. He knew very well that this young man wanted to kill him. If he hesitated for a moment and didn't show his value in time, what awaited him would be the destruction of his body and soul. Death or slavery, he wasn't stupid. He knew which was the right choice. After subduing this flood dragon, Li Mu walked to the two sisters on the shore and said, "Use the spirit snail to inform your father and have him come to pick you up." Li Mu was full of resentment towards the White Demon King. He took his wife everywhere, but his two daughters were not his own. The snake tribe indeed valued beauty over family. Since the matter here was over, Li Mu asked County Chief Lin to dismiss the strong cultivators of the North County. These people thought that there would be a fierce battle, but they didn't expect that they were just watching the show. The flood dragon that shocked the East County was actually no match for that lord. No wonder even the county chief was so respectful to him. The demon officials of the East County Demon Division bowed to Li Mu before leaving. They were originally just mountain spirits and wild monsters. They should thank the young man in front of them the most for their current status and identity. Li Mu planned to wait here for 2 days until the White Demon King came personally to pick up the two sisters. A day later, a man in white strode into the East County's government office. The two sisters went forward and said happily, "Father." The White Demon King looked at them with a smile. He looked at Li Mu and said, "Brother Li, long time no see." Li Mu said calmly, "I'm afraid the White Demon King has recognized the wrong brother." The White Demon King laughed and said, "Although the way you address me has changed, our friendship has not changed. Thank you for taking care of Inshin and Tingshin during this period." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "There's no need to say these words." The White Demon King looked at Ao Run, who was standing behind Li Mu, and asked, "This is the little flood dragon?" While Ao Run was feeling nervous, a huge fist smashed into his face. Crackling sounds kept coming from the government office. From the moment the White Demon King stepped in, Li Mu realized that his cultivation had broken through to the 6th realm. He was originally at the peak of the 5th realm, and was not weaker than Chu Jiang of Gojoseon. He must have encountered something in the past 2 years. Ao Run could not fight back at all under the White Demon King's attack. Soon he could only lie on the ground, motionless like a dead pig. The White Demon King kicked him a few more times and said fiercely, "You dare to have crooked thoughts about my daughter. If it was me 2 years ago, I would have skinned you, pulled out your tendons, and made a slingshot to shoot birds." After the White Demon King vented his anger, he smiled at Li Mu and said, "Long time no see. Brother Li, why don't you come to the Eastern Sea with me? Let me take care of you." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "No need. I still have things to do in the divine capital." He had been enjoying the happiness of having a wife. If Tingshin and Inshin were not in trouble, he would not have left the divine capital. Now that the White Demon King was here, he just wanted to go back and cultivate happily with his wives. The White Demon King said regretfully, "If that's the case, I won't force you. In the future, when you come to the Eastern Sea as a guest, just let Inshin and Tingshin know." Li Mu nodded and said, "We'll talk about it in the future." After saying goodbye to the two reluctant sisters, Li Mu stepped on the road back to the divine capital. Before he left, he gave Ao Run some time to say goodbye to the female demons at home. "I'll be back. You have to wait for me. I love you." Li Mu thought that as soon as Ao Run left, the female demons in his cave would scatter like birds and beasts. However, to Li Mu's surprise, the female demons beside the dragon were not hypocritical to him. They didn't seem to have been snatched back by him. When Ao Run left, each and every one of them looked at him with tears in their eyes. Li Mu learned from County Chief Lin that Ao Run was a pervert. It was famous in the eastern county. Many female demons liked to follow him. Following a dragon was very beneficial to their cultivation. There were many married women among them. Ao Run did not reject any of them. Although this caused quite a bit of conflict, it was at most an ethical problem. Otherwise, the Northern County government would have reported it to the Imperial Court and asked the Department of Worship to send people to quell the chaos. In the sky above the Eastern County, Ao Run transformed into a dragon. Li Mu stood on the dragon's head. He looked down and saw the mountains below quickly retreating. As expected of a dragon, with a level 5 cultivation, his speed was comparable to a level 6 human. A true dragon's flying speed should be even faster. Ao Run carried Li Mu and flew in the sky. He sighed in his heart. To think that he, a demon king, would one day become a human's mount in order to save his life. If the other dragons knew about this, what would they think of him? At a certain moment, he opened his dragon mouth and said in human language, "Master, how did you learn my dragon's superpower?" This was what he still had doubts about. If he knew how to summon the wind and summon the rain, it would be fine. But if he learned it on the spot, it would be too terrifying. He had never heard of anyone who could do such a thing. Li Mu said calmly, "Don't ask what you shouldn't ask." Ao Run immediately shut up and didn't dare to say anything else. Li Mu rode the dragon and swaggered through the sky. Along the way, no matter if it was a human or a demon, they were all shocked when they saw this scene. The dragon clan was rarely seen. Even if it was just a flood dragon, just the aura it emitted was enough to make some low-level monsters lie on the ground and tremble. The sharp-eyed cultivators even noticed that there was a figure standing on the head of the flood dragon. There's actually someone on the dragon's head. Who's riding on the dragon? Could this flood dragon be his mount? It was too far. Although they couldn't see the person's face clearly, everyone's eyes immediately became respectful. Dragons were just born and had the strength of a level 4 human. They were the top race on the continent. What kind of powerhouse could have a dragon as a mount? At this moment, the peerless powerhouse standing on the dragon's head was thinking about a question. If there were more than 3 women in Li Mu's house, there would be tension. There were so many demonesses in Ao Run's house, but they could still get along well. This didn't make sense at all. Li Mu pondered for a moment and said, "I have a question for you." Ao Run was worried that he wouldn't have a chance to show off. He immediately said, "Master, please ask." Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "There are so many demonesses in your cave abode. Are they usually so harmonious?" Although Ao Run didn't know why his master was interested in this question, he still answered honestly, "Occasionally they'll be jealous, but they're still considered harmonious." Li Mu continued asking, "Why are they so harmonious?" Ao Run said, "Maybe it's because they love me." Li Mu said disdainfully, "They're just being forced by you and don't dare to resist." Ao Run, who had always been submissive and didn't dare to disobey Li Mu, actually retorted, "Master, you're wrong. Although I like beauties, I have a bottom line. If they really don't want to follow me, I won't make things difficult for them. I've already let 2 of them go before." Li Mu asked, "What about the others?" Ao Run said proudly, "As for the others, after seeing my overbearing aura, they don't want their husbands anymore. They want to follow me no matter what. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame me for being too charming and deeply attracting them." Li Mu said, "That's immoral." Ao Run continued to refute, No, this is the morality of you humans. In the demon race, only the strong are respected. Only the strong are worthy of having more demonesses. Different races had different ideas. Li Mu didn't intend to change Ao Run's mind. But speaking of this topic, Ao Run seemed to be energized. He said disdainfully, "To be honest, I look down on some humans. In my cave abode, there are more than a dozen beauties around me all day, and they're all very harmonious. Some humans only have 3 to 5 women at home, and they're jealous of each other everywhere. They're forming cliques and making the atmosphere in their homes foul. Master, don't you think this kind of person is ridiculous?" Li Mu stood on his head and said, "Stop for a moment. Ao Run stopped and asked, Master, do you have any other orders? Li Mu said indifferently, You're so strong. You must be very unwilling to be my subordinate. I'll give you a chance. Challenge me again. If you win, I'll give you back your freedom. Ao Run shook his head repeatedly. No, I'm willing to be your subordinate. Li Mu said coldly, Cut the crap. Do whatever I tell you to do. Chapter 503. Divine Capital. Li Residence. In the morning, when Li Mu walked out of Li Qing's room, Wanwan and Xiao Bai had already returned from grocery shopping. They were washing vegetables at the kitchen door, while discussing a strange incident that had been spreading among the people of Divine Capital. A few days ago, more than one person in Zhong County had seen a divine dragon flying across the sky while working in the fields. Divine Capital was inland, so there weren't many opportunities to see the water tribe. Dragons had always only appeared in rumors. Once the news of a divine dragon appearing in Zhong County spread, it caused widespread discussion among the people. The people had never seen a true dragon before, so naturally, they couldn't tell the difference between a flood dragon and a true dragon. Li Mu didn't bring the flood dragon back to Divine Capital. Instead, he placed it in a river in Zhong County, so that it could cultivate and wait for Li Mu's orders. For the peace of the place, Li Mu also set 2 rules for it. First, it wasn't allowed to appear in front of people and disturb the people. Second, in the next 10 years, it could only solve its physiological problems with its hands. It wasn't allowed to seduce married women, nor was it allowed to abduct ignorant women. Whether it was a human or a demon, Li Mu would cut off its tools if he was caught. After 10 years, Li Mu would have reached Realm 6 and wouldn't need the flood dragon anymore. He could set it free. Today was the day that Phantom Princess and the others returned to the Yao Nation. Li Mu personally led the officials of Honglu Temple to send them out of the city. Phantom Princess originally wanted Li Mu to escort her back to Thousand Fox Nation, but Li Mu heartlessly refused. Although her identity was very special, and the Yao Nation and Diabolism saw her as a thorn in their side, the Queen of Thousand Fox Nation today was no longer the Phantom Princess of the past. Li Mu had given her almost all the wealth that he had inherited from Emperor Bai. Now even if she fought with the Empress, she might not be at a disadvantage. She didn't need anyone to protect her. This trip to Divine Capital was a huge blow to Phantom Princess. If she didn't leave Qianhu Kingdom, she wouldn't be able to imagine the difference between the Queen of Qianhu Kingdom and the Empress of Great Zhou. Compared to the Divine Capital of Great Zhou, her Qianhu city was at most a barren mountain village. Unless she could unify the Yao Nation, become the Queen of the 10,000 Demons, and raise her cultivation to the 7th level, then she would have the qualifications to be on equal footing with Zhou Yi. At the city gate, Illusion Princess looked at the flying ship floating in the air and said to Li Mu, I'm leaving. Li Mu's face lit up with joy. He quickly said, Goodbye. When she was in Chengdu, she was trying her best to sow discord between him and the Empress in front of Lu Hanyan. Once she left, Li Mu's family would at least be more harmonious. Li Mu had been looking forward to this for a long time. Phantom Princess caught the smile on his face and snorted, Are you happy that I'm leaving? Li Mu waved his hand and said, Of course not, ha ha ha. Seeing the flying ship turn into a stream of light and fly away, Li Mu rubbed his waist, which was still aching, and returned to the palace to report. In Chang'e Palace, Zhou Yi hugged Zhongling and asked calmly, Did that fox leave? Li Mu, yes. Zhou Yi pressed her face against Zhongling's face and said with a smile, Ling, her mother will take you to a fun place. The little girl said, Daddy will go too. Li Mu followed behind the mother and daughter, and walked out of Chang'e Palace. Perhaps the Empress had really reached the age of being a mother. She doted on Zhongling so much that even Li Mu felt that he had been left out. However, he didn't need to be jealous of his own daughter. He enjoyed the feeling of a happy family of 3. When he was free in the future, he would have 2 more children with Lu Hanyan and Li Qing. Then his life would be complete. In the palace, the officials and palace maids were already used to this scene. Everyone knew that Lord Li's daughter had taken Her Majesty as her godmother. Her Majesty doted on her very much and often summoned her to the palace. She ordered the imperial chefs to make all kinds of delicious food for her, and took her to play in the palace. Everyone in the palace already knew this cute little girl. As for where Lord Li's daughter came from, there were many different opinions. Some said that he had her with Madame Li when he was young, and it was only now that it was made public. Others said that she was the child of Lord Li and the Demon Kingdom Queen, and was only recently sent back. The officials with some cultivation could naturally see that Lord Li's daughter wasn't human, nor was she a demon. She was a spirit, and it was very likely that she was the child of Lord Li and a ghost. It wasn't strange for something like this to happen to him. Everyone knew that Lord Li was neither friend nor foe. He was upright and plain-spoken, and devoted to the people and the country. However, he was lustful and surrounded by beauties. Not only did he have rumors with Her Majesty, but it was also said that he had a good relationship with the Demon Kingdom Queen. This actually proved that Her Majesty doted on him. Since ancient times, there had been many princesses who were children of important ministers, but it was very rare for them to directly recognize their relatives. In the palace, Zhou Yi led Zhongling into the ancestral temple, and Li Mu followed. This wasn't his first time here. Compared to last time, the ancestral temple had changed a lot. The furnishings and decorations were still the same. 36 small cauldrons were connected to a large cauldron, and a golden dragon was swimming in the large cauldron. However, the golden light on each small cauldron was much more dazzling than the last time Li Mu saw them. The most dazzling cauldron was naturally the one in the middle that belonged to the central commandery. The people of the divine capital had the strongest psychokinesis, and it was comparable to the combined power of several other cauldrons. When Li Mu came last time, the cauldrons of psychokinesis in the various commanderies were far from this bright. This meant that in the past 2 years, the psychokinesis of the people of the various commanderies had greatly increased. On the one hand, the abolition of the silver punishment law, and the punishment of the corrupt officials, had made the people trust the imperial court more. On the other hand, after the demon division was established in the various commanderies, the demons in the Great Zhou also contributed a lot of psychokinesis. In addition to the small cauldrons being brighter, the golden dragon on the large cauldron was also fatter than the last time Li Mu saw it. At this moment, it was happily swimming in the cauldron. 3 elders wearing 4-clawed dragon robes were guarding here. They were the experts of the Xiao royal clan. Ever since the Zhou clan stole the emperor's aura, the Xiao clan had sent 3 clan experts to guard the ancestral temple to prevent the emperor's aura from being stolen again. These 3 people were almost all of the top combat power of the Xiao royal clan. When the 3 elders saw the empress bring Li Mu and Zhongling in, they only looked up and closed their eyes again. Zhongling reached out to grab the golden dragon. Li Mu hurriedly said, "You can't touch it." Zhou Yi glanced at Li Mu and said indifferently, "Why can't you touch it?" She looked at the golden dragon and said, "Come here." The golden dragon trembled as it flew over. Zhongling caught it and played with it. It was originally a formless object, but Zhongling was also a spiritual body. She easily caught it in her hand and played with it wantonly. Zhongling played with the spirit of psychokinesis for a while and lost interest. Although they were both spiritual bodies, she relied on the origin power of heaven and earth. This dragon was condensed from psychokinesis, and could not be absorbed by her for cultivation. So she quickly let go of the dragon. After the golden dragon regained its freedom, it immediately entered the cauldron, and did not dare to poke its head out. Zhongling clearly did not know that this was the most important place in the Great Zhou. She only felt that this place was claustrophobic and boring. Soon, she made a fuss about leaving. After the family of 3 left, the ancestral temple regained its silence. 2 of the 3 people sitting cross-legged in the corner cultivating with their eyes closed slowly opened their eyes. The elder on the left frowned slightly and muttered, "What does she mean by this? Why did she suddenly adopt a daughter?" The elder on the right said indifferently, "What's there to guess? As long as she doesn't pass the throne to the Zhou family, whatever she does has nothing to do with us. Watch this emperor's qi carefully. According to the current rate of psychokinesis gathering, this new emperor's qi will mature in 5 years or 10 years. At that time, as long as we get ahead of the Zhou family, we can settle the situation in one fell swoop." After he finished speaking, his eyes were filled with emotion. He said, "She has only been on the throne for 5 years. Who would have thought that in the history of the great Zhou, the emperor who condensed emperor's qi the fastest was actually her?" The elder on the left glanced at him and asked in return, "Isn't this a big deal? Why don't you think about how she got the throne? If she gave this emperor's qi to her adopted daughter, what can we do?" The elder on the right shook his head and said, "That's impossible. You also know that the girl is just a spiritual body. Her origins are unknown. She can't accept the emperor's qi. The officials and the people of the great Zhou will not accept her as the emperor. If Zhou really wants to do that, the 4 great academies will not sit by and do nothing." The elder on the left looked at him and said indifferently, "That girl is impossible, but what about the others? What if she likes this feeling and decides to give birth to one herself? At that time, will the people still object? Will the 4 great academies still object?" As soon as he said this, even the elder in the middle who had his eyes closed all this time suddenly opened his eyes. In these 2 years, the situation in the divine capital had undergone earth-shaking changes. The old and new parties that had once controlled the entire imperial court had long lost most of their right to speak in the imperial court. Many officials, led by Zhang Chun, had begun to stand firmly on the empress side. 2 years ago, the 4 great academies had clearly supported the old and new parties. In these 2 years, their attitudes had become more and more unpredictable. The reason was that previously, everyone had thought that the great Zhou would be destroyed by a female emperor. However, the reality was the opposite. The great Zhou was now the strongest and most united in the past 50 years. The 4 great academies no longer had a reason to interfere with the empress's selection of an heir. With the empress's current popular support and the power she held, as long as her decision was not too out of line, the people and the 4 great academies would not object. It was not out of line for her to give birth to a child and pass the throne to him in the future. When the 3 of them thought of this possibility, they suddenly realized that at some point in time, the Xiao clan had completely lost control of the great Zhou. They looked at the emperor's qi in the big cauldron, their eyes burning with passion. The Xiao clan's loss of power could no longer be reversed. This emperor's qi might be their last hope. After a long silence, the elder in the middle slowly said, "We must not sit by and watch this happen. Inform King Ping and let them prepare early." Chang'an Palace. After leaving the ancestral shrine, Mr. Mei and Shangguan Li took Zhongling to the imperial garden to play. Only Li Mu and the empress were left in the main hall. In fact, a long time ago, Li Mu had been thinking about a problem. Who was the empress planning to pass the supreme position of the great Zhou to? He had asked Mr. Mei in a roundabout way before. Mr. Mei had warned him not to guess the empress's intentions. This was not a question he could ask. At that time, Li Mu and the empress were not very close. Now he felt that he could ask. Li Mu's tone was calm. He asked casually, "Your Majesty, have you thought about who to give the emperor's qi in the ancestral shrine?" Zhou said, "To the Xiao clan." When she said this, she did not hesitate. It was obvious that she had already planned this. This was the same as Li Mu's guess. If she did not want to pass the throne to the Xiao clan, she would not have allowed the 3 elders of the Xiao clan to guard the ancestral shrine. This meant that the empress had already made this decision when she first ascended the throne. Based on Li Mu's understanding of her, she must have felt that the Zhou clan did not have the right to the throne. The Xiao clan had ruled the great Zhou for hundreds of years. The idea that the Xiao clan was the royal family was deeply ingrained. It was reasonable to give the Xiao clan the title. Zhou looked at Li Mu and asked, "What do you think?" Li Mu said, "Your Majesty, I will listen to you." He used to think that it was better for the empress to give birth to her own child than to pass the throne to an outsider. However, seeing how much the empress doted on her child, she probably could not bear to let her own child suffer. However, the world that they had fought so hard to conquer was given to the Xiao clan for nothing. Although he had already guessed this, after receiving confirmation from the empress, Li Mu still relaxed about the court matters. He was no longer as energetic as before. He did not even care about the matter of Shengua's provocation in the border county, and the decrease of the psychokinesis in the South County. He left it all to the secretariat to deal with. For 3 consecutive days, Li Mu was late and left early. Today he still left early and got off work early. When he returned home, he took a wedding invitation from Wan Wan. Li Si and Chun Miao Miao had given birth to a pair of twins. Tonight, they invited him to their house for a drink. Li Mu naturally would not refuse and brought Zhong Ling over tonight. At Li Si's house, Li Mu saw Zhang Chun, whom he had not seen for a long time. He had just returned from a business trip. Li Mu did not know if it was his imagination, but he felt that Zhang Chun was intentionally avoiding him tonight. After the banquet ended, Li Mu waited outside the door. When he saw Zhang Chun walk out, he asked, "Old Zhang, did I offend you?" Zhang Chun shook his head repeatedly. "No, how could it be?" Li Mu asked. "Then why are you avoiding me?" Zhang Chun said flatly, "No, why would I avoid you for no reason?" Li Mu thought that he was thinking too much. He pointed at Zhang Chun and said to the little girl in his arms, "Linger, this is Uncle Zhang." Zhang Chun smiled awkwardly at Zhong Ling. Li Mu asked in confusion, "Why aren't you curious? Who gave birth to this child with me?" Zhang Chun shook his head. "I'm not curious. I'm not interested in this matter at all. I still have matters to attend to at home, so I'll go back first." Li Mu looked at his back in surprise. It had only been a month since they last met, but he had changed so much. He was completely unlike the gossipy Zhang Chun that Li Mu knew. The streets of the fairy's capital were bustling as usual. All kinds of news and topics of conversation gathered here. Today, the commoners were most interested in the private affairs of the Li residence. The sudden appearance of a child by Lord Li's side caused a heated discussion in the fairy's capital. It even overshadowed the matter of the illegitimate child during the reign of the previous emperor. There were differing opinions about who Lord Li had given birth to this child with. Some said that it was Lady Li's, while others said it was the Demon Kingdom's queen. No one knew when it started, but there were rumors that the child was Lord Li's and His Majesty's. In the past, the commoners naturally did not dare to talk about His Majesty. However, after the self-discipline law was reformed, the Great Zhou no longer convicted people based on words. The commoners' topics of conversation became bolder and bolder. At a temporary tea stall on the street, the waiter selling tea whispered to the customers, "Hey, have you heard? Lord Li and His Majesty gave birth to a daughter." One of the customers heard this and said happily, "Is that true?" The waiter was stunned and asked in surprise, "This is something that goes against ethics. Why do you seem so happy?" The customer said without hesitation, "Of course. Like father, like son. The child of Lord Li and His Majesty will definitely be a dragon among men in the future. If she can inherit His Majesty's position, our children and grandchildren will also be able to live good lives." When the customers heard this, they all responded in unison. "Is that true? There's such a good thing?" "If it's true, then that's great. This is the best news I've heard this year, no, in the past few years." The waiter at the tea stall looked at the crowd in a daze. He had thought that this matter would be criticized and discussed by the common people. He had never imagined that the common people would actually have such a reaction. It was as if they were happier than if they had given birth to a child themselves. Li Mu had also heard the rumors circulating in the marketplace. The common people usually did not have the guts to criticize the empress. There had to be someone pushing this matter behind the scenes. As for who was pushing it, Li Mu did not need to think to know. It was either the Xiao clan or the Zhou clan. Their goal was undoubtedly to use the pressure of public opinion to cut off the possibility of the empress passing the throne to someone else in advance. Unexpectedly, the common people's support for the coupling of Li Mu and the empress was so high. In just 2 days, there were already many people calling for the empress to make him empress. The person behind the scenes had gone for wool and come home shorn. More importantly, with the empress's bearing, no one knew the consequences of offending her better than Li Mu. He walked into Changle Palace and saw that the empress's expression was extremely ugly. Zhou Yi saw Li Mu walk in and said in a low voice, "I've changed my mind." Li Mu was puzzled. "Changed your mind about what?" Zhou Yi said coldly, "I don't want to give that imperial aura to the Xiao clan anymore." Li Mu said in a daze, "Your Majesty wants to pass it to the Zhou clan?" Zhou Yi said no. Li Mu thought for a moment and said in astonishment, "Could it be that your majesty really wants to give birth to a child?" Before Zhou Yi could speak, Zhongling, who was in Li Mu's arms, clapped her hands and said happily, "Good, good, I already have a younger brother or sister to play with me. Father, mother, you can have another one." Chapter 504. Li Mu looked at the innocent Zhongling and explained, "Linger, be a good girl. Don't mess around. Father and mother gave birth to you differently from giving birth to a younger brother or sister." The little girl blinked curiously and asked, "What's the difference?" Perhaps she was envious of other children who had siblings to accompany them. But how was Li Mu supposed to explain to her that she was actually born from heaven and earth, and not the product of his and the Empress's hard work? Zhongling's intelligence grew very quickly, but she obviously couldn't understand this. Li Mu and the Empress looked at each other. Li Mu looked embarrassed. The Empress held Zhongling's face and smiled. "Ling, don't worry. You will have a younger brother or sister in the future." After receiving the Empress's promise, Zhongling happily ran off to play. In Chang'e Palace, Li Mu saw the Empress looking at him. He said decisively, "Your Majesty, please give up on this idea. My wife and I have no plans to have children. Li Mu, Lu Hanyan, and Li Qing would be busy with political affairs in the next few years. Even if they had children, they wouldn't have much time to accompany them. This wasn't good for the child's growth, so they planned to have another child in a few years." Zhongling's appearance was at most an accident. Zhou Yi glanced at Li Mu indifferently. "Linger is my daughter. Why should another woman give birth to her younger brother or sister?" Li Mu thought for a moment and asked, "Does your Majesty want to have one yourself?" Zhou Yi asked, "Are you willing to watch as the world that you and I worked so hard to build is given to someone else?" Li Mu didn't hesitate and said decisively, "No." He had spent a lot of effort to build the Great Zhou to what it was today. How could he be willing to give it to someone else? Everyone in Shendu knew what kind of people the Xiao clan was. If this world fell into their hands again, the foundation that Li Mu had built for the Empress over the past few years would be completely destroyed by them. The geographical location of Great Zhou wasn't considered good. To the east were the water tribes, to the south were the various countries with evil intentions, to the west was Yudu with evil intentions, and to the north was the demon country eyeing them covetously. There were threats in all directions, and once Great Zhou was defeated to a certain extent, the four barbarians would definitely rise up and attack. This was also an important reason why the central dynasty of Zhou province never lasted long. There were strong enemies spying on all sides. Once there were 3 generations of incapable rulers, the neighbors would not give the central imperial court a chance. When external pressure began to be exerted, the already loose internal structure would be easily crushed. The key question was, if the Empress wanted to have a child herself, how would she do it, and with whom? Considering the voices of the masses, this candidate would naturally be Li Mu. However, this wasn't in Li Mu's life plans. Zhou Yi looked at him and said, "The Great Zhou being where it is today is mostly due to your efforts. Who the Emperor's aura is given to is not only my business, but also yours." Li Mu didn't know what she was thinking, so he could only say, "Your subject will listen to everything your Majesty says." Zhou Yi thought deeply for a moment and said, "I plan to give it to our child." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Your Majesty also knows about Ling Er's identity. Not only the court officials, but even the people won't be able to accept that the Emperor of Great Zhou isn't human. This will cause the Great Zhou to lose the foundation of the people's hearts." Although Li Mu thought that he had gained the recognition of the people, it didn't mean that he could do whatever he wanted in Great Zhou. This was a place that had been ruled by humans since ancient times. It was absolutely impossible for a foreign race to rule over it. Zhou Yi glanced at him and said indifferently, "I'm not talking about Ling Er." Li Mu was even more confused and asked, "Other than Ling Er, do we have other children?" Zhou Yi said, "Not now, but that doesn't mean we won't have any in the future." Li Mu stared at the Empress in a daze, hundreds of thoughts flashing through his mind. Was this a hint? No, this was no longer a hint. This was a blatant declaration. And it couldn't even be considered a declaration. This was a confession. The Empress finally couldn't help but reveal her feelings to him. Zhou Yi continued, As long as we take your bloodline and merge it with mine, we can have a child with both of our bloodlines. This way, I won't have to pass the throne to an outsider, and Ling, or will have a younger brother or sister. Li Mu suddenly understood and said, "So that's what your majesty means?" Zhou Yi looked at him and asked in return, "What do you think it means? Do you want to be my empress?" Li Mu didn't obey the empress this time. He shook his head and said, "Your majesty, I can't accept this method. I hope that my child will be like all the other children in the world, born from his mother's 10 months of pregnancy, and not through this method. If he asks us the same question as Ling, or in the future, how should we answer?" Zhou Yi's chest heaved up and down. After taking a deep breath, she said, "You're blaming me. Do you think I don't want to? If you appeared earlier, if you were more determined and not fascinated by other people's beauty, how could things be like this?" She flung her sleeves and said angrily, "Mei Wei Ali, accompany me to the Imperial Garden to relax." Mr. Mei and Shangguan Li had just walked in with Zhongling when they walked out with the Empress. The little girl walked to Li Mu's side and tugged at his sleeve. She whispered, "Father, mother is angry. Go and comfort her." Li Mu could hear the strong resentment in the Empress's words. But everything had to be first come, first served. If he was late, he would be late forever. If he had met the Empress first, then he would have been second only to one person in the Great Zhou. He would have been the father of the world and respected by all the people. But he had met Lu Hanyan and Li Qing first, so he was destined to be unable to enter the harem. If Li Mu was given another chance, he still wouldn't change his choice. He squatted down and held the little girl's face. He said, "Your mother is still angry with me. Go and comfort her for me." Zhongling nodded seriously, and chased in the direction of the Imperial Garden. The court had just ended, but Li Mu had no interest in going to the Secretariat. After walking out of Chang'e Palace, he left the palace directly. However, just as he walked out of the palace gate, a figure blocked his way. Li Mu looked at the middle-aged man in front of him and raised his eyebrows. He asked, "Your Highness Qingping, what's the matter?" Qingping glanced at him and said calmly, "Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you're handsome. No matter what the surname of the Great Zhou's royal family is, it won't be Li." Li Mu looked at Qingping and asked, "Were you the ones who spread the rumors in Fairy's capital?" Qingping didn't answer directly. He said coldly, "Stealing the country won't happen a second time in the Great Zhou. If the Xiao family behaved themselves, the Empress would still belong to them when the Emperor's qi condensed in 10 years or 5 years. They would win the many years of battle with the Zhou family without a fight. However, the premise was that they didn't provoke the Empress." Li Mu sighed softly. He looked at Qingping and asked, "Do you know how pigs die?" Qingping frowned. "What do you mean?" Li Mu couldn't be bothered to answer him and left directly. Although Qingping didn't like Li Mu, it was undeniable that he was very resourceful. This kind of person wouldn't throw such a question at him for no reason. There must be a deeper meaning behind it. One person's ability was limited. For this reason, he gathered the core members of the Xiao family and discussed it together. Did Li Mu say this? There's no head or tail. How do we explain it? The word pig is definitely not as simple as it seems. Is there a reference? Is he secretly cursing the Xiao family? He must know that we were the ones who secretly incited the rumors about him and the Empress. While they were discussing, a voice suddenly sounded from the corner. King Shou stood up and asked in disbelief, "You guys spread rumors about Li Mu and Her Majesty in the streets. This kind of thing can't be hidden from Her Majesty." Qingping said, "So what if she knows?" This was meant for him and the Empress to hear. They're neither emperors nor subjects. Aren't they afraid of being criticized by the world? If they really give birth to a child, the Great Zhou will be laughed at for thousands of years. King Ding said regretfully, "It's a pity that those ignorant people are mostly in favor of this." King Shou sat back down and covered his face with both hands. He didn't know what to say. After a long while, his voice came from between his fingers. "If there's an answer to this question, then the pigs must have died of stupidity. They were so stupid that they threw away the cooked duck." Qingping frowned and asked, "What do you mean?" King Shou leaned back in his chair and said tiredly, It's obvious that the Empress has no intention of taking the throne. Since she took the throne, she put Li Mu in an important position to fend off foreign forces and unite the people. She planned to leave as soon as possible after condensing the emperor's qi. She allowed the three uncles to stay in the ancestral temple, because she wanted to return the throne to the Xiao family. Why do you have to do it again? What do you know? King Ping glared at him and said, the Zhou family spent hundreds of years to successfully steal the country. How can she return the throne so easily? I think she wants to give birth to a child herself and change the surname of the great Zhou's royal family. If she really wanted to pass the throne to the Xiao family, she wouldn't change her mind because of such a small matter. That depends on whether Her Majesty is generous or petty. It's very possible that the throne that originally belonged to the Xiao family was lost because of this small matter. King Shou thought of his experience in the past month and sighed softly. He said, obviously Her Majesty isn't a generous person. King Ping frowned and looked at him. You're not her. How do you know what she's thinking? King Shou covered his face again and said, I don't know. I'm just talking nonsense. You guys continue. I'll take my leave first. He stood up and walked to the door. His footsteps paused as he said, get someone to tidy up the three royal uncles' residences. I guess they should be back soon. Not long after King Shou left King Ping's residence, three elders descended from the sky. Everyone walked out of the room. King Ping was shocked. Royal uncles, weren't you guarding the ancestral shrine? Why did you come out? The three elders' faces were gloomy. The elder in the middle said, that woman chased us out. She's really coveting the emperor's energy. King Ping stood on the spot in a daze. His face was full of regret as he muttered, he guessed it right. The elder asked, guessed what? King Ping's face was solemn. He shook his head and said, nothing. Royal uncles, what should we do now? King Ping naturally could not hide such a big matter. The three elders soon found out the reason why they were chased out of the ancestral shrine. The three of them could be heard cursing from King Ping's residence. I'm so pissed. You've messed this up. You're as stupid as a pig. You should apologize to the previous kings. Li Mu's residence. When Li Mu stepped into the house, Lu Hanyan asked in surprise, why have you been coming back so early these few days? In the past, Li Mu was willing to work for the Empress no matter how hard or tiring it was. However, these few days he was working for the future Xiao clan. Li Mu was naturally not as motivated. He took out the 2 bouquets of flowers he bought on the street from his back. He passed one to Lu Hanyan, and the other to Li Qing. He smiled and said, nothing is more important than accompanying you too. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing should have returned to the sect a long time ago. Although the reason why the peak masters could advance to the 6th realm so early was related to their talent and the sect's resources, the most important thing was still their hard work and cultivation. Li Mu used all kinds of excuses to force them to stay. He could not let them stay at home while he stayed in the palace all day. He held the 2 girls' hands and said, I'll take a long leave from Her Majesty later. I won't go out every day. Although the 2 girls were happy to hear this, Lu Hanyan, who liked to let her imagination run wild, thought of a fact. She couldn't help but become melancholic again. She said melancholically, although we can be together now in 100 years, whether it's me, Sister Qing, Xiao Bai, or Wan Wan, we won't be able to accompany you anymore. Why don't you find someone who is more powerful and talented than us, someone who can accompany you for the rest of your life? Women were really strange creatures. She was clearly only in her 20s, in the most beautiful years of her life, but in her heart, she was thinking about things 100 years later. Li Mu pretended to be thinking. After thinking for a long time, he said, why do I have to find someone who is more powerful and talented than you two? When the time comes, I can still choose a young and beautiful girl who is 17 or 18 years old. Lu Hanyan was stunned. Then, her slender hand rested on Li Mu's waist. Gritting her teeth, she said, I'll let you be young and beautiful. I'll let you be young and beautiful. Li Mu held her restless hand and said, if I don't find someone young and beautiful, in such a short time, where do you want me to find someone who is more powerful and talented than you two, and who is also willing to be with me? In the courtyard of the Li residence, there was a fluctuation in the space. Zhou appeared with Zhongling in her arms. She put Zhongling down and prepared to return to the palace. She looked around and saw that everyone was looking at her. She asked faintly, "Why are you all looking at me?" Lu Hanyan stood up and said, "Your Majesty is here to send Ling off?" Zhou nodded slightly and said, "I'll leave Ling to you. I'm going back to the palace." Lu Hanyan looked at her and suddenly said, "It's almost time to eat. Your Majesty, eat with us before you leave. Ling should want you to stay." Zhongling was stunned for a moment. Then, she hugged Zhou Yi's leg and said happily, "Mother, stay for dinner. Aunt May and Aunt Li will come too." Although the Empress might not listen to Lu Hanyan, she would fulfill all of her daughter's wishes. Therefore, not only did she stay, but she also asked Shangguan Li and Mr. May to come as well. When it was time to eat, Lu Hanyan took the initiative to pick up a piece of fish for the Empress. She smiled and said, "Your Majesty, try this. I made it myself." Li Mu almost had a fish bone stuck in his throat. When Lu Hanyan and the Empress appeared together, the atmosphere was extremely cold. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was like falling into an ice cave. Lu Hanyan actually took the initiative to pick up food for the Empress. Li Mu's first reaction was that Lu Hanyan was crazy. In the face of Lu Hanyan's kindness, Zhou quickly responded. She tasted a piece of fish and said, "When I first met you, I only knew that your zither skills were unparalleled. I didn't expect your cooking to be so good as well. You're almost as good as the chefs in the palace." Mr. May and Shangguan Li looked at each other. Shangguan Li remembered very clearly that when the Empress was still the crown princess, the three of them went to listen to Lu Hanyan play. Shangguan Li praised her zither skills, and the Empress's comment was, "It's just so." Lu Hanyan also said, "When I first met you, Your Majesty, I was amazed that there was such a beauty in the Immortal's capital. It made me feel ashamed of myself." Wan Wan, who was eating with her head down, looked up at Shangguan Li and quickly lowered her head again. If she remembered correctly, when she praised that sister's beauty, Shangguan Li said, "It's just so." Lu Hanyan and the Empress actually started praising each other. Li Mu saw this and his chopsticks fell to the ground. He pinched his thigh hard. The intense pain told him that this was not a dream. Chapter 505. When Lu Hanyan and the Empress began to compliment each other, the meal was especially harmonious. Li Mu was actually able to see the two of them get along well in his lifetime. It could be said that he had fulfilled one of his greatest regrets. Lu Hanyan took the initiative to befriend the Empress, and because of Zhongling, the Empress came to the house more frequently. From once every 3 days, once every 2 days, to twice a day now. Li Mu didn't go to the secretariat these 2 days. He only went to the Department of Consecration to inspect. Feeling an aura outside the door, Li Mu walked to the door and opened it. Ao Run stood at the door with his head lowered. He respectfully said, "Master." Li Mu asked indifferently, "Is it done?" Ao Run immediately said, "Master, the one causing trouble in the river is a green fish demon. I have already followed your orders and captured it, and handed it over to the local Yao division. A few days ago, the Department of Consecration received a request for help from a certain county's Yao division. There was a water demon causing trouble in the county's waters. Because the officials of the Yao division were all land demons and couldn't swim well, the water demon escaped several times. They then asked for help from the Department of Consecration. There were no water demon elites in the Department of Consecration, so Li Mu gave Ao Run an order to deal with it. This time, he came to report to Li Mu. Li Mu said, "If you are done, go back and cultivate." Ao Run bowed and said, "Yes." Lu Hanyan asked in the courtyard, "Is there a guest?" Li Mu said, "No, it's the mount I took in." Lu Hanyan didn't know the details. She only knew that Li Mu took in a dragon as a mount. She had never seen it before, so she said, "It's time to eat. Let him eat before he leaves." Since she had already spoken, Li Mu couldn't refute. He glanced at Ao Run and said indifferently, "Come in." Ao Run lowered his head and walked into the courtyard, not daring to look around. The Empress held Zhongling's hand and walked over. The little girl flew into Li Mu's arms and asked, "Father, Mother, when are we going out to play?" When Ao Run saw this, he immediately said to the Empress, "I pay respects to matriarch." Li Mu kicked him in the butt and glared at him. He looked at Lu Hanyan and Li Qing at the table and said, "Those two are the mistresses. This is His Majesty." It wasn't easy for his family to be harmonious for the past 2 days. If it was destroyed by this stupid flood dragon, Li Mu would definitely peel off his flood dragon skin, pull out his flood dragon tendons, and chop up his flood dragon meat to feed the dogs. Ao Run looked at Zhongling, then looked at Li Mu and the Empress. His eyes swept over Lu Hanyan and Li Qing. Confusion appeared in his eyes. He shook his head vigorously and said, "Master, the relationship in your family is a bit messy. Let me sort it out." When it was time to eat, Li Mu gave Ao Run a bowl and casually picked some food and asked him to squat in the corner to eat. Lu Hanyan looked at Li Mu and asked, "That's not good." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "You don't know. He looks like a dog, but he's actually not a good person. In the demon realm, he goes around seducing married women. After that, he shows off in front of their husbands. He has more than a dozen wives and concubines at home, but he's still dishonest all day long." Taking a bite of rice, Ao Run tried to defend himself. "Master, I've said it before, in our demon realm, strength is everything. Even if someone steals their wife, they can only blame themselves for being too weak. Besides, they're willing to follow me. I didn't force them. In fact, I look down on some humans the most. They're obviously very strong, but they don't even dare to steal the person they like. What's the point of cultivating then? As for their husbands, they're not strong enough to take care of their wives, so they can only blame themselves for being too weak." Li Mu suddenly stood up and grabbed the back of Ao Run's neck. He coldly said, "Stop eating, I'll take you to see something good." On this day, the people of the capital saw lightning flashing in the sky. A flood dragon was rolling in the clouds and howling. Then its body was charred black and fell into a lake in Zhongjun. Since then, the lake was renamed Fallen Dragon Lake. The people didn't dare to go near it anymore. When Li Mu returned home, Lu Hanyan and the Empress were chatting happily as if nothing had happened. This is actually very strange. After all, although they've met before, they've only spoken less than 5 sentences in total. The Empress has her pride, she won't easily lower herself. Lu Hanyan also has Lu Hanyan's pride. If she doesn't like someone, no matter how noble their status is, she will absolutely ignore them. However, she was the one who took the initiative. Although Lu Hanyan didn't say it explicitly, how could Li Mu not know what it means? With her arrogant personality, she's willing to take the initiative to flatter the Empress. As a wife, she's already thinking about Li Mu in 100 years. Combined with what she said to Li Mu just now, it's obvious that in her eyes, the Empress is more talented than them and has a longer lifespan. She's the best candidate to be with Li Mu until his lifespan ends. After the Empress returned to the palace, Lu Hanyan glanced at Li Mu. After spending so much time together, Li Mu already understood the meaning of her gaze and action. He followed her into the room. Lu Hanyan sat on the edge of the bed and patted the side of her body. Li Mu walked over and sat beside her. Lu Hanyan asked, "Can you tell what Her Majesty thinks of you?" Li Mu asked cautiously, "What do you mean?" Lu Hanyan pinched her waist and said, "There are no outsiders here. What's the point of pretending in front of me?" Deeply affected by Lu Hanyan's tricks, Li Mu had long since stopped taking the initiative to fall into them. He asked, "What do you mean? Speak clearly. If you don't say it, how will I know what you mean?" After Lu Hanyan calmed down, she slowly said, "Her Majesty is still so young, but she's already a 7th realm elite. I don't believe you can't see Her Majesty's feelings for you. If you're thinking of waiting until my sister and I reach the end of our lifespans before you can be together with Her Majesty, I advise you to express your feelings to her as soon as possible. Do you want her to wait 100 years for you?" Li Mu looked at her and asked, "Are you not afraid that you'll regret it when you reach the 7th realm?" Lu Hanyan thought carefully, then suddenly waved her hand and said, "Pretend I didn't say anything." Walking out of the room, Li Mu lightly slapped himself because he blamed himself for being talkative. When he walked into the courtyard, his heart sank. Whether it was Lu Hanyan being sentimental or preparing for a rainy day, there would come a day when Li Mu would have to face this problem. He had no doubts about reaching the seventh realm. The legacy of the Fulu school, the telekinesis of the people of Great Zhou, and the telekinesis of the Yao of Thousand Fox Kingdom would allow him to step into this realm in 20 years, or even less. But what about Lu Hanyan and Li Qing? What about Wanwan and Xiaobai? There was a common understanding in the cultivation world. Transcendence was 10% effort and 90% legacy. An individual's talent and cultivation effort were actually not the decisive factors in whether or not one could reach the seventh realm. The Empress had transcended because of the imperial qi. Hyun Jinko and Yuzenzi had achieved this because of the legacy of the Fulu school. The Blue Wolf King and the 10,000 Illusions God Lord had also gathered the power of the Yao nation and bitterly cultivated for dozens of years to reach their current cultivation. Li Mu was confident that he could advance. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing only had a sliver of hope even though they had the Fulu school behind them. Xiaobai and Wanwan didn't even have a sliver of hope. Li Mu was proficient in the techniques of both the human and Yao races, and he had also completely comprehended the heavenly tomes of the Pill Cauldron sect. But there was no way for them to easily cross this natural chasm like he had, unless he used the demonic Dao's blood and soul sacrifice method, similar to the Thousand Illusions' venerable master. But he wouldn't even consider this method. Li Mu thought carefully for an entire day. The only method he could think of was to establish a nation. The fastest shortcut to cultivation was to use the willpower of living beings. The easiest way to gather the willpower of living beings was to do what the Great Zhou and the Yong Kingdom did. They would build a national temple among the commoners and use the power of the nation to nurture the imperial qi. The Yong Kingdom's 5 generations of wise monarchs had worked hard to develop the country. In less than 100 years, they had nurtured 3 strands of imperial qi and created 3 seventh realm experts for the imperial family. Li Mu believed that he could do the same. But if he did, he wouldn't be able to stay in the Great Zhou. He would be letting down the Empress. Li Mu walked through the imperial palace with a heavy heart. When he passed by the secretariat, a figure suddenly ran out. Louis grabbed Li Mu's sleeve and asked, "Where are you going, Lord Li?" Li Mu didn't answer. Instead, he raised his eyebrows and asked, "Is something the matter, Lord Lu?" Louis hurriedly said, "It's not that I have matters to attend to. It's that the secretariat has matters to attend to. Recently, there has been an endless stream of major and minor matters in court. My colleagues in the secretariat are too busy. I would like to ask, when will Lord Li return to the Yamen?" When Li Mu was in the secretariat, Louis didn't think much of it. When Li Mu wasn't present, all the heavy responsibilities were placed on his shoulders. Only now did Louis realize how difficult everything was. Big and small matters required him to coordinate and plan. If he could control the various ministries and departments, it would be fine. But with his prestige and strength, he couldn't control the people below him. The imperial qi in the ancestral shrine hadn't been decided yet. He also didn't know who he was making wedding clothes for. Influenced by Lu Hanyan's plans for a rainy day, Li Mu's mind was no longer on state affairs. Waving his hand, he said, "Lord Lu, just pretend that I'm not part of the secretariat. I'll take my leave first. See you later." Finished speaking, he didn't even look at Louis and directly left. Louis looked at his back with a puzzled expression. He didn't know what was wrong with him. Could it be that his wife had heard the rumors about him and the Empress and quarreled with him? Louis shook his head. He couldn't blame his wife. When the people heard the rumors, they didn't condemn it. Instead, they called for the Empress to make Lord Li Empress and let them have a real child. If he was Lord Li's wife, he wouldn't be able to tolerate it either. Changel Palace. When Li Mu walked into the main hall, he saw the Empress sitting on the dragon throne. She seemed to be thinking about something. Li Mu didn't disturb her. He was thinking about how to talk to her later. Although he couldn't let Lu Hanyan and the others enter the 7th level, he could still let them enter the 6th level early. The Heavenly Book of the Danding sect had a recipe for breaking through to the creation realm. This pill was at the saint level. As long as there were enough materials, Li Mu could make it. He planned to ask the Empress for a long vacation to gather the materials for this pill. Lu Hanyan's tolerance and generosity made Li Mu feel even more sorry for her. He planned to let them enter the 6th level as soon as possible to prevent her from thinking too much. Zhou Yi was deep in thought for a long time, as if she had made a decision. She looked at Li Mu and said, Li Mu also raised his head and said, you first. Your Majesty, you first. Their gazes met. Zhou Yi nodded and said, I've decided who to give the next imperial qi to. Li Mu asked who. Zhou Yi said, give it to Lu Hanyan. Li Mu thought he heard wrong and asked in shock, who? Zhou Yi said, give it to your wife. Li Mu came back to his senses after a long time. He asked, just because she said you were beautiful? Of course not. Zhou Yi glanced at him and said, I've thought about it. I've been on the throne for 5 years. If I don't lose the hearts of the people in the Great Zhou, another imperial qi will mature in 5 years at most. At that time, if I continue to be the empress of the Great Zhou, this imperial qi can be used to create another 7th level cultivator for the Great Zhou. If the hearts of the people can grow like they have in the past 2 years, then the next imperial qi will mature in less than 10 years. Within 100 years, at least 10 imperial qis can be condensed. Your contribution in condensing the imperial qi is the greatest. At that time, I'll give 1 to your second madam, 1 to Wanwan, 1 to Xiaobai, 1 to Mei Wei, 1 to Ali, and 1 to Ting Xian. There will still be a few left. The Empress's words stunned Li Mu for a long time. Then he suddenly saw the light. If he wanted to condense imperial qi, he didn't need to build a country. Right before him was a huge empire with the largest population and the most united hearts. With the size of the Great Zhou, it used to take at least 20 years to condense 1 imperial qi, and as long as 50 years. If a wise ruler, the time would be shortened, and if a fatuous one, the time would be extended. Li Mu was confident that he could shorten the time needed to condense imperial qi to less than 10 years. As long as the Great Zhou was in the hands of the Empress, she had the absolute right to decide what to do with the imperial qi. The Empress was still the same Empress. If others treated her well, she would return the favor tenfold. Lu Hanyan had only given her a piece of fish and praised her for her beauty, and the Empress had directly gifted her with an imperial aura. This was probably the most expensive fish in history. With this, Li Mu's greatest wish was fulfilled. The advancement of imperial qi was the power of the entire country. With the millions of people in the Great Zhou, wouldn't it be easy to create a 7th level cultivator in 10 years? The 7th level cultivator created this way would be as powerful as the Empress. In front of them, the Blue Wolf King and Heaven Lord of Illusions would be like clay chickens and pottery dogs. This was a good thing for everyone except the Empress. She could have left this cage very soon and gone to a place where no one could find her to grow flowers and plants. Now, she would be trapped here for the rest of her life. She would be the one suffering, and Li Mu would be the one benefiting. Zhou Yi looked at Li Mu and asked, "What do you think?" Li Mu was silent for a moment and asked, "Your Majesty, are you really willing to stay in the Immortal's capital for the rest of your life?" Zhou Yi said calmly, "That depends on you. If you don't help me, I don't want to be the Empress for even a day. If you help me, so what if I'm the Empress for the rest of my life?" Li Mu puffed out his chest and said seriously, "I'm willing to go through fire and water for your Majesty. I won't hesitate to die for you." Zhou Yi glanced at him and said, "I don't need you to go through fire and water. Just help me look at the memorials every day and deal with the affairs of the state." Li Mu took a deep breath and looked up into her eyes. He said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Zhou Yi asked, "What did you want to say just now?" Li Mu didn't say anything. He just stretched out his arms and hugged the Empress tightly. Zhou Yi's face turned red. Her hands hung in the air behind Li Mu's back. She didn't know what to do. Li Mu quickly let go of her. He turned around and strode out of Chang'e Palace. Imperial Secretariat. Lu Yi picked up a memorial with a worried expression. Suddenly, a familiar voice sounded from outside the door. Li Mu walked into the office and said loudly, "Let me do it." Several hours later, Li Mu hurried out of the Imperial Secretariat before the palace doors closed. The feeling of working for himself and working for others was completely different. Before Li Mu looked at each memorial, he would tell himself that he was working so hard not for the Great Zhou court, but for the people of the Great Zhou. For the will of the people, for the gathering of imperial qi, for the sake of being together with the person he loved. This way, not only would he not feel annoyed, he would even want to look at a few more memorials. When he returned home, the light in Li Qing's room had already been extinguished. However, the light in Lu Hanyan's room was still lit. Li Mu pushed open the door and walked in. He found that Li Qing was also in Lu Hanyan's room. Li Mu looked at them and said, "It's good that you're all not asleep. I have something important to tell you." Among the cultivators in the world, the most relaxed were the imperial families of the various countries. They did not need to cultivate at all. Just by relying on the inheritance of the imperial family, they could reach the highest realm that others could not reach in their entire lives. From today onwards, Lu Hanyan and Li Qing would no longer need to return to Mount Baiyun to cultivate in seclusion. The husband and wife would no longer need to be separated for a long time. Li Mu could already imagine how happy they would be when they learned of this. Lu Hanyan said, "We also have something to tell you." This kind of important news naturally had to be the finale. Li Mu said, "Then you guys go first." Li Qing lowered her head slightly. Lu Hanyan's expression was somewhat guilty. She said, "We're going back to Mount Baiyun tomorrow. Tonight, let's cultivate together." Li Mu was stunned. Lu Hanyan asked, "What did you say was important?" Li Mu came back to his senses and shook his head. He said, "I suddenly feel that this matter is not that important. Let's talk about it tomorrow morning." He waved his sleeve and the lights in the room went out. In the morning, Li Mu hugged two soft bodies. Because yesterday was the last night, Lu Hanyan and Li Qing did not want to monopolize Li Mu. After a difficult choice, they decided to cultivate together. Lu Hanyan nestled in Li Mu's arms. She thought of what happened last night and asked Li Mu, "What was the important thing you wanted to say yesterday?" Li Mu put on his clothes and got out of bed. He walked to the door and said, "You praised His Majesty yesterday. His Majesty is very happy and wants to reward you with something." Lu Hanyan asked, "What is it?" Li Mu said, "Emperor Qi from the ancestral temple. His Majesty has decided to give it to you and Qingqing. Xiaobai and Wanwan also have a share. So, you don't have to go back to Mount Baiyun. You don't have to cultivate so hard in the future." Lu Hanyan said in shock, "Really?" Li Mu said, "Why would I lie to you about something like this?" Lu Hanyan and Li Qing looked at each other. In the next moment, two pillows flew from the bed toward Li Mu. Li Mu walked out of the room first. The pillows flew back to the bed. Lu Hanyan's face turned red. Li Qing buried her entire body in the blanket. Chapter 506. After discovering that the three members of the previous generation of the Xiao family had been expelled from the ancestral temple, Li Mu knew that the Empress was serious. Therefore, in the long days to come, Li Mu needed to do one thing. He needed to help the Empress govern the Great Zhou, and ensure that the Great Zhou was stable internally, that there were no strong enemies outside, and that the faith of the people could be maintained or continue to grow. This was not for anyone else, but for himself, for the people he loved. In the secretariat, Louis asked someone to send a pile of memorials to Li Mu's office. She leaned against the chair and let out a long sigh of relief. The familiar Lord Li had finally returned. In the office, Li Mu sat behind the table and looked at the two memorials in front of him. He frowned and slowly tapped the table with his index finger. In the past, the greatest threat facing the Great Zhou was the Demon Nation. They had no time to care about anything else. Whether it was the Shun Nation stirring up a fight at the border of the two nations during the chaos, or the greatly reduced faith of the people in the South County, they did not attract much attention from the imperial court. Now that the chaos of the Demon Nation had temporarily subsided, the imperial court and the Qianhu Nation were inseparable. These two matters needed to be brought to the forefront. These seemed to be two matters, but in fact, it was only one. Ever since the last time the tribute was paid and the Great Zhou fell out, the Shun Nation had been restless. They banned the merchants of the Great Zhou from entering and destroyed the goods of the Great Zhou. The anti-Zhou sentiment in the country was serious, and they repeatedly disturbed the border. The South County bordered the Shun Nation, and the faith of the people was greatly affected. Li Mu first asked the Empress to go to the ancestral temple to check on the Faith Cauldron in the South County. However, the Empress had taken Lu Hanyan, Li Qing, and Zhongling to a spring outing outside the city. She was not in the Chang'e Palace, so Li Mu could do as he saw fit. She did not bring Mr. Mei and Shangguan Li with her on this trip. Therefore, Li Mu asked them to accompany him to the ancestral temple. The ancestral temple was an important place in the Great Zhou. It was where the emperor's qi was nurtured. It was related to the future of a country. The Xiao family lost the throne because they did not take good care of the emperor's qi. In order to avoid suspicion, Li Mu could not go there alone. Li Mu still had not told them that the empress planned to give each of them a wisp of imperial qi in the future. Zhou Yi was just like that. When a person achieved the Tao, everyone around them would ascend to the heavens as well. She wanted nothing more than to give all the good things to those around her. In the ancestral temple, the three elders were no longer there. Even the cattail hassock on the ground had been thrown away. The golden dragon swam in the cauldron at the center of the ancestral temple. Li Mu looked at the 36 small cauldrons. There were differences in the brightness of the small cauldrons, but other than the one in Shendu, the differences in the other cauldrons were not too great. Li Mu walked forward and saw the word Nan on the cauldron. After coming to the ancestral temple, Li Mu confirmed that something had indeed happened in Nan County. He then went to the Department of Worship and sent a few Fifth Realm worshippers to Nan County to investigate the matter. When he left the palace and returned home, Lu Hanyan and the Empress had already returned from their trip. He had dealt with too many reports in the past 2 days. He leaned against the stone chair in the courtyard to rest. Fully relaxed, he quickly fell asleep. Wanwan was helping Lu Hanyan wash the vegetables. She looked back at Li Mu and said, "Young master must have dreamt of something good. Miss, look at how happy he is." Lu Hanyan remembered what happened last night. She could not help but blush. She said, "He must be thinking of something improper again." Zhou Yi walked to Li Mu and sat down. She secretly formed a seal with her hands hidden in her sleeves. In his 2 lifetimes, Li Mu had never been as happy as he had been the night before. As a result, he even had a dream about it. When he woke up, he opened his eyes and saw the Empress sitting across from him. Her face was covered in a layer of light pink. Li Mu was confused. He asked, "What's wrong, Your Majesty?" Zhou Yi stood up and said, "No, nothing." Li Mu watched her leave as if she was running away. He was speechless. She's so weird. Because of his careful actions last night, Lu Hanyan and Li Qing did not let Li Mu into the room tonight. He slept alone in the study and thought about cultivation. The last trip to the East County made him realize one of his weaknesses. With his cultivation improved, he was not afraid of ordinary 6th realm cultivators no matter on land or in the air. However, in the water, the strength he could exert was greatly reduced. It would take a lot of effort to deal with Ao Run. This was not Li Mu's weakness. Human beings were not as good at fighting in the water as the Water Clan. Apart from a few amphibious demon races, only the Dragon Clan could be good at fighting on land and in the water. When the Department of Offerings encountered trouble from the Water Clan, there was nothing they could do except to pump the water. Although he had Ao Run, the Tool Dragon, at his disposal, it was not realistic to let him deal with it every time. Li Mu searched his mind and found a kind of medicine pill called the water-repelling pill. Although it was called a medicine pill, it was actually a magic treasure. It was refined with the essence and blood of the Water Clan. If mortals held it in their mouths, they would not drown. If cultivators carried it with them, it would have a certain water-repelling effect and reduce the weakening of their strength when fighting in the water. With the water-repelling pill, human cultivators could exert 70 to 80% of their strength in the water. It was said that if one could swallow a Dragon Clan's inner core, they would have the abilities of the Water Clan in the water. Not only would their mana not be weakened, but it would also increase greatly. They could even suppress low-level Water Clan. It was the most ideal water-repelling magic treasure. However, it was rare to see a Dragon Clan on the mainland, let alone obtain a Dragon Clan's inner core. He got some essence and blood from Ao Run to refine some water-repelling pills, and distributed them to the officials of each county. The next time the Water Clan caused trouble, they would be able to deal with it themselves, and would not have to ask for help from fairy's capital. This was what the Empress should do. In the future, Li Mu would have to worry about her. This time he did not plan to ask Ao Run to come over. This evil dragon was too talkative. It was better to ask him personally. If he was talkative and revealed Tingxin's joke, Li Mu would have to spend a lot of effort to explain it to them. At a lake in Zhong County, Li Mu floated above the lake. Ao Run's begging voice came from the bottom of the lake. Master, I'm wrong. I won't talk anymore. Don't worry. I won't tell mistress that you have 2 snakes outside. Li Mu said lightly. I'm not here to settle the score with you. Give me some of your essence and blood. I have a use for it. Ao Run hesitated for a moment and said, the second one is fine. The first one. Can you wait until tomorrow? I don't have it today. Li Mu extracted a bucket of flood dragon blood from Ao Run's body and casually tossed 2 pills to the pale-faced Ao Run. Then he flew back to Luoyang. There were still some materials needed to refine the water-repelling pill. Li Mu spent a few days to collect them. It was already 10 days later when he refined the water-repelling pill. He came to the Department of Offerings and gave dozens of blood-red pills to the offerings in charge. He said, distribute these water-repelling pills to the 36 counties. In the future, if there are any problems related to the Water Clan, you don't have to ask for help from fairy's capital. After leaving behind the water-repelling pills, Li Mu asked him, how's the matter in South County? Speaking of South County, the offerings looked helpless and said, my lord, the Shen Kingdom hates our great Zhou very much. Although they didn't do anything officially, the cultivators of the Shen Kingdom kept causing trouble at the border of South County. Yesterday, the Department of Offerings received news that the colleagues we sent to South County to investigate were all injured by the cultivators of the Shen Kingdom. Li Mu frowned and asked, isn't there a garrison in South County? Are they just going to watch the people of the Shen Kingdom invade the border? The offerings said, my lord, you might not know this, but the imperial court has placed most of its troops outside the Demon Kingdom and the Ghost Realm. Among the 4 armies of Zhenbei, Pingxi, Annan, and Dingdong, the Southern Army and the Eastern Army are the weakest. Moreover, the shameless people of the Shen Kingdom don't invade in large numbers. They usually sneak past the border of South County in 1 or 2 groups. The Southern Army can't guard against them. After leaving the Department of Offerings, Li Mu went to the Ancestral Temple and found that the psychic power sent by the Psychic Power Cauldron in South County didn't increase. Instead, it was dimmer. The people of the Shen Kingdom could use anything, but he couldn't use his psychic power. Whether or not he could have a few 7th Realm wives in the future and live off them in peace depended on the psychic power of the people of the 36 counties. If a few 5th Realm offerings were injured in South County, the result would be the same if they sent others. The countries of the Zhu continent had a tacit understanding. In order to prevent the war from escalating and both sides being injured, the border conflicts were limited to those below the 6th Realm. Once the 2 high offerings interfered, it meant that the Great Zhou and the Shen Kingdom had officially started a war. War would only bring slaughter and death. This went against the national policy of peaceful coexistence that the Great Zhou had always pursued. Even if they won, it might cause the 2 years of hard work of Li Mu and the Empress to go down the drain. Unless it was absolutely necessary, they couldn't take this step. Sometimes having a low cultivation wasn't a bad thing. The 2 high offerings couldn't make a move, so Li Mu planned to take a look himself. After reporting his itinerary to the Empress, Lu Hanyan, and the others, Li Mu summoned Ao Run and immediately set off. Among the 4 counties, the South County was the closest to the divine capital. With Ao Run's maximum speed, they arrived in less than 3 days. South County. The South County of the Great Zhou bordered the Shen Kingdom. Since the establishment of the Shen Kingdom, there had been an army stationed here. It was called the Annan Army. When the Annan Army was at its peak, in the face of the provocation of the Shen Kingdom, they once invaded the hinterland of the Shen Kingdom and almost broke into the Shen Kingdom's capital. Since then, the Shen Kingdom was unable to recover from the setback and didn't dare to invade the Great Zhou anymore. After the south was settled, the imperial court began to transfer the powerful cultivators of the Annan army to the northwest. Now the once strongest Anan army had become the weakest of the four armies. The border of the South County was extremely long. Unlike the Northern Army, the Anan army stationed in the South County had 10 people as sentries. They were scattered all over the border, guarding the border of the Great Zhou. In recent days, because the Shen Kingdom kept invading the border, the Southern Army's sentries clashed with the Shen Kingdom cultivators many times. However, both sides were able to control themselves and only suffered injuries. The South Lake was a large lake on the border between the Great Zhou and the Shen Kingdom. In the past 100 years, the two countries had never let go of the dispute over the ownership of the lake. There were many conflicts. Later, in order to settle the dispute, the two countries reached an agreement. With the small island in the center of the South Lake as the boundary, to the north of the small island was the Great Zhou. To the south of the small island was the territory of the Shen Kingdom. There was a formation that forbade flying above the South Lake. Cultivators could not fly. The soldiers and civilians of the two countries were not allowed to cross the boundary of the small island. However, at this moment, the light of spells flashed frequently on the northern shore of the South Lake. 10 Southern Army soldiers were fighting a bitter battle with more than 20 Shen Kingdom cultivators. This was the northern shore of the South Lake, the territory of the Great Zhou. Clearly, the Shen Kingdom cultivators had crossed the border to provoke them. They had the advantage in numbers, and the Southern Army soldiers were retreating. A young soldier grew timid and could not help but say, "They have more people. We are no match for them. Why don't we retreat first and call for reinforcements?" Another older man said with a resolute expression, "This is the territory of the Great Zhou. Behind us are the people of the Great Zhou. We cannot retreat a single step." The young soldier took a deep breath. Looking at the people around him who were fighting bitterly, his expression gradually became resolute. His hand seals changed even faster. However, although their opponents were not very strong, they had far more people. Soon, they were all heavily injured. The Shen Kingdom cultivators all had mocking expressions and mocked them. "This is the Great Zhou's strongest Southern Army? What strongest? Even the weakest soldiers of the Shen Kingdom are stronger than them. How did they enter the Shen Kingdom in the past? Did they make it up?" The 10 soldiers of the Great Zhou were humiliated and angry, but they could not resist. Just as they were about to fight to the death, a stream of light appeared in the sky behind them and rushed toward the southern lake. There were 2 powerful auras in the stream of light. These 2 auras came from the direction of the Great Zhou. The people of the Southern Army were delighted and said excitedly, "The reinforcements are here." However, the expressions of the cultivators of the Shen Kingdom changed. These 2 auras were extremely powerful, and they could not defeat them. They jumped into the southern lake behind them, and fled in the direction of the Shen Kingdom. The stream of light was extremely fast. The people of the Southern Army looked at the stream of light with anticipation. Their expressions gradually changed from surprise to shock. As the stream of light approached, they saw clearly that it was a flood dragon. The flood dragon was completely white, and there was a figure standing on its head. A young man rode the flood dragon, and landed on the northern shore of the southern lake. A middle-aged man quickly walked forward and cupped his fists respectfully. "Greetings, Senior. May I ask if Senior is sent by the Imperial Court to reinforce the southern county?" Li Mu nodded and said, "I'm from the Department of Worship. What happened here?" The middle-aged man pointed at the southern lake behind him and gritted his teeth. "Sir, the cultivators of the Shen Kingdom forced their way across our borders and provoked our garrison. Before Senior came, they had just escaped." Li Mu felt the auras in the southern lake. He glanced at Ao Run and said, "Catch them." Ao Run jumped into the lake without hesitation. The man was about to stop him, but it was too late. Under the surface of the lake, 2 white figures were faintly discernible. Huge waves rolled up on the surface of the lake. Li Mu actually discovered another powerful aura at the bottom of the lake. Just from the aura alone, his strength was above Ao Run. The middle-aged man said in a panic, "Sir, let your mount come up quickly. There's a huge dragon from the Shen Kingdom at the bottom of the southern lake. It's very powerful." There was no need for him to remind him. In the next moment, Ao Run let out a painful roar and broke out of the water. He stood beside Li Mu in a sorry state. He pointed at the bottom of the lake and said to Li Mu through gritted teeth, "Master, there's a dragon in the lake. I can't beat it. Let's draw the water. We can't spoil it." Chapter 507. They could drain the water when dealing with Ao Run, but this was the border between the Great Zhou and the Shen Kingdom. Draining the lake would cause a territorial dispute between the Great Zhou and the Shen Kingdom. At that time, the Shen Kingdom would bite back, and the Great Zhou would be the one who took the initiative to provoke them. At that time, the grievances of the people and soldiers in the South County would be in vain. Li Mu glanced at Ao Run and said, "Find a way to force her out." Ao Run's face turned bitter and said, "Master, that's a real dragon. I'm no match for her." Li Mu said lightly, "If you can force her out, I'll give you a month's leave when we go back this time. You can go back to the East County." "Oh, Ying Ping Ping Hong Hong, Suehua, wait for me at home." A deafening roar came from the north shore of the South Lake. Ao Run turned into a flood dragon and rushed into the lake. Huge waves began to surge in the lake again, and from time to time, there were bursts of dragon roars. Li Mu stood on the shore and asked the middle-aged man, "What's going on with this dragon?" The middle-aged man cupped his fists and said, "My lord, the South Lake was originally a separate island between the Great Zhou and the Shen Kingdom. However, a few months ago, a giant dragon suddenly came here. When our soldiers approached the shore of the lake, they would be attacked by it. The people of the Shen Kingdom took the opportunity to occupy the island in the middle of the lake and control the entire South Lake. They repeatedly went ashore to provoke us and injured many of our sentries." As soon as Li Mu learned the situation from the sentinel, there was a cry from the lake. Ao Run flew out of the lake again, holding his stomach. A wound on his lower abdomen was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. He wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and said with fear, "That was close. Damn, you were so ruthless. My baby was almost gone." He was worried that Li Mu would blame him for failing to complete the task, so he immediately said, "Master, don't be angry. I still have a way to force her out." Li Mu glanced at him and said, "Speak." Ao Run said, "We can pee in this lake. If one person can't do it, we can call 100 people, 1,000 people. I don't believe she can still stay in the water." Before he could finish his words, a thick water column shot out from the lake and hit Ao Run, sending him flying 1,000 feet away. Ao Run flew back quickly. He pointed at the lake and said angrily, "Come up here if you have the ability." What answered him was another water column. State affairs were no small matter. This dragon had disgraced the dignity of the Great Zhou. Li Mu said to Ao Run in a deep voice, "Give me your Flood Dragon Core." The Flood Dragon Core was very important to him. Without it, his strength would be reduced by at least half. But since his master had spoken, Ao Run didn't dare to refuse. He carefully spat out a pigeon egg-sized ball and worriedly said to Li Mu, "Master, it's very important to me. You have to take care of it." Li Mu grabbed the pill. Looking at his rough appearance, Ao Run's heart was bleeding. Li Mu put the pill into his sleeve and jumped into the southern lake. This time, he didn't feel any rejection from the lake. Instead, he felt a sense of affinity. Although Ao Run's monster core couldn't increase his strength in the water, it wouldn't suppress him either. As soon as Li Mu entered the water, he saw a dragon tail sweeping towards him. It was too late to dodge. He stretched out his arms, but he was still pushed back dozens of feet. His arms were numb. A white dragon was dozens of feet away, staring at Li Mu with lantern-sized eyes. Li Mu wasn't stupid enough to compete with a dragon in terms of physical strength. With a thought, a golden beam of light flew out from his body. The Dao Bell rapidly expanded in the water and enveloped Li Mu. However, it didn't protect him like before. The bell flowed like water and attached itself to Li Mu's body. Moments later, the Dao Bell disappeared. Li Mu's body didn't seem to have changed, but his skin had darkened slightly. After the bell spirit absorbed the heaven and earth origin energy and transformed into a human, it could separate itself from the bell. The Dao Bell also had some uses that Li Mu hadn't expected. The dragon tail attacked again. Li Mu stood in place and allowed the dragon tail to land on his body. Kacha. Li Mu's body didn't move at all, but a sound came from the dragon tail. Li Mu heard a cry of pain in the water. He didn't give the dragon a chance. He stretched out his arms and hugged the dragon tail. He used his Herculean art and rapidly rose up. Above the southern lake, there was a huge splash. A white dragon that was more than 100 feet long flew out of the water. Li Mu hugged its tail. After it flew out of the water, it turned its body and slammed its huge dragon head into Li Mu. Facing the dragon head that was as large as his body, Li Mu also slammed his head into it. Bang! There was a loud crash in the void, and the figures of the man and the dragon were both sent flying. However, the white dragon was suspended in the air, motionless, as if it was stunned by the crash, while the figure of the man continued to fly towards it. By the lakeside, Ao Run's body trembled. This collision hurt even him. To be able to gain the upper hand against a dragon with his body, he realized that his master had held back. Then he became happy. He hugged his arms and shouted, "Beat him up! Beat him up!" He would be happy to see either the female dragon or the man get beaten up. He even hoped that the female dragon would be more ruthless and help him vent his anger. Beside Ao Run, the 10 southern soldiers on the lakeside were also dumbfounded. This was an adult dragon. Although its cultivation was at the 5th realm, it could not be tamed unless one was at the 6th realm. Wasn't this lord from the worship department a little too powerful to be able to contend against a dragon with just his body of flesh and blood? In the sky, Li Mu's fist had arrived. The dragon suddenly opened its mouth and spat out a ball of flame. This was dragon breath, one of the most powerful flames in the world. Its power was even greater than the true Samadhi fire. It was one of the dragon's racial talents. In the face of this dragon breath, Li Mu raised his hand. A transparent barrier formed in front of him and blocked the dragon breath completely. The dragon roared at the sky again. Dark clouds quickly gathered above Li Mu's head, and a strong wind blew. The rain borrowed the wind's momentum and swept towards him. Li Mu stood in the rain and looked at the dragon indifferently. In the next moment, dark clouds also gathered above the dragon's head. The sky full of water hit its body. The dragon roared in pain and swayed its body, continuing to charge towards Li Mu. "Freeze!" Li Mu pointed with his finger. The huge dragon's body stopped in the air for a moment and quickly broke free. At this moment Li Mu spoke again. "Formation!" This time, the dragon's body completely stopped in the air. Li Mu's figure flashed, and he was already riding on the dragon's body. Green light appeared on his fist, and he fiercely smashed the dragon's body. The dragon let out a dragon's roar, and its body twisted non-stop. Li Mu tightly grabbed the mane on its back, and his punches landed on the dragon's body, causing the dragon to roar continuously. Ao Run looked up at this scene, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He muttered he even hit a woman. Too ruthless. This was the first time the soldiers of South County had seen someone beat up a true dragon like this. One of them muttered, "Are the consecrated masters of the worship department already so powerful? Even a true dragon is being chased and beaten by him. He's still so young." The middle-aged man looked at the figure beating up the dragon in the air, and a light suddenly appeared in his mind. He said excitedly, I know who he is." Bang! Li Mu's full-strength punch smashed the dragon from the sky to the ground, causing a cloud of dust to splash up. He rushed down and rode on the dragon again. He grabbed its mane and punched the dragon's body. Suddenly, the dragon's body under him changed. In the next moment, Li Mu found that he was riding on top of a white-clothed girl. One of his hands was grabbing her hair, while the other hand was clenched into a fist and punched her chest. Puff! The girl grunted. Even though Li Mu had restrained most of his strength, she still grunted, and blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Li Mu let go of her hair and got down from her body. He asked in a deep voice, "Evil creature, do you know what the punishment is for colluding with the Shin Kingdom to invade Great Zhou?" The girl closed her eyes and turned her head away. She gritted her teeth and said, "If you want to kill me, do as you please." Ao Run was worried that Li Mu would really kill the dragon. He quickly ran over and said, "Master, you can't kill her. You mustn't kill her. The dragon race can't give birth to a child for 100 years. If you kill a dragon, the dragon race will fight us to the death." The heavens were fair. The dragon race was born with great strength, but it was extremely difficult to reproduce. Almost every dragon couple was infertile, which caused the dragon race's population to be very small. Otherwise, with their strength, they would have unified the ancestral province long ago. Li Mu looked down at the dragon girl and asked, "What's your name? Why are you opposing the great Zhou?" The girl still didn't speak. Li Mu didn't immediately force her. He first tied her up with the immortal binding chains. At this time, the Southern Army soldiers had already approached. The middle-aged man looked at Li Mu and suddenly asked, "If I may be so bold, may I know your name?" Li Mu looked at the crowd and smiled. He said, "Great Zhou's consecration department, Li Mu." As soon as he said this, the 10 people knelt on one knee and cupped their fists. The middle-aged man said excitedly, "Song Xian of the Southern Army's 7th Army 2nd Century Squad, greets Lord Li." Li Mu personally helped him up. He looked at the crowd and said, "You've all worked hard." The middle-aged man took a deep breath and stood up straight. He said solemnly, "It's my duty." Li Mu patted him on the shoulder and took out a few bottles of healing pills. He distributed them to everyone and returned the Jiaodan to Ao Run. He said, "Catch those guys at the bottom of the lake." The cultivation of the 20 or so people from the Shen Kingdom was only at the 4th realm. They were quickly captured by Ao Run. Their cultivation was sealed, and they were tied up on the shore. At first, these people were very stubborn. However, after Ao Run's torture and interrogation, they immediately confessed. They were the border guards of the Shen Kingdom. They were ordered by the Shen Kingdom's imperial court to deliberately cross the border and provoke a conflict between the two countries. A few months ago, there was a huge change in the Yao Kingdom. The northern part of the Great Zhou was in danger. The Shen Kingdom wanted to take advantage of the situation and occupy the Great Zhou's southern county, while the Yao Kingdom invaded the Great Zhou. At that time, the Great Zhou would have to deal with the powerful enemy, the Yao Kingdom, and would be unable to mobilize troops. Unexpectedly, the chaos of the Yao Kingdom was quelled so quickly, and their plan fell through. Li Mu asked them to temporarily detain these people from the Shen Kingdom. He learned about the current situation of the southern county from Song Xian. Great Zhou did not have many troops in the southern county. The entire southern army only had about 10,000 people. It was different from the northern army, which had a large number of troops. The border between the Great Zhou and the Shen Kingdom stretched for thousands of miles. The southern army had built countless outposts on the border defense line. Each outpost was guarded by a small team of 10 people. Even so, the outposts on the southern border were sparse. There were often people from the Shen Kingdom who secretly crossed the border and caused trouble in the Great Zhou. In recent months, the Great Zhou had no time to care about the Shen Kingdom. The Shen Kingdom was even more unscrupulous. The people of the southern county were deeply disturbed. Naturally, the faith of the people was extremely low. It was impossible to completely change this situation. The border between the two countries was too long. No matter how many troops Great Zhou had stationed on the southern border, it could not completely eliminate this phenomenon. The imperial court could not waste too many troops here. The simplest way was, of course, to completely scare the Shen Kingdom, just like 100 years ago. However, the Great Zhou could not take the initiative to start a war. Li Mu rubbed the space between his eyebrows. Suddenly, a bell rang from Song Xian's waist. Song Xian heard the bell and took out a string of bells from his waist. One of them vibrated and made a crisp sound. His expression changed and he said, "It's the 5th team asking for help. They're in danger." Li Mu asked, "Where is the 5th team?" Song Xian pointed in a certain direction and said, "To the east, 25 miles away." "I'll go take a look first." "Follow me," Li Mu said. Then he turned into a stream of light and sped toward the east. 25 miles away, 10 sentries of the Southern Army were surrounding a bald man. The man was dressed differently from the people of the Great Zhou. Although it was said to be a siege, the man was actually fighting against 10 people with ease. With his Realm 5 cultivation, he could completely trample on these small cultivators who were only at the 2nd and 3rd realms. And what he enjoyed was the process of trampling on them. Ever since the Shen Kingdom and the Great Zhou fell out, the people of the country wanted to go to war with the Great Zhou. Even if there was a conflict with the Great Zhou border army, the imperial court would not blame them. The weapons of the southern army sentries slashed the bald man's body, creating a series of sparks. The bald man casually hit the dantian of a young sentinel with his palm. His cultivation was completely destroyed, and his aura immediately withered. In a few breaths, this person had destroyed the cultivation of 6 sentinels. Just as he raised his hand again, he suddenly raised his head and looked to the west. There was a powerful aura coming over at a high speed. He casually destroyed the sentinel in front of him and said indifferently, "The experts of the Southern Army are here. I won't play with you anymore." As soon as he finished speaking, he quickly retreated in the direction of the border. As long as he crossed that boundary marker, he would be in the territory of the Shin Kingdom. That stone marker was a place that the Great Zhou border army could not cross. Thinking of this, he sped up again. But in the next moment, he suddenly felt his hair stand on end. A flying sword chased after him at an unbelievable speed. It pierced through his back and nailed his body to the boundary marker. His primordial spirit left his body and fled to the other side with a terrified expression. However, even though he had already stepped into the territory of the Shin Kingdom, a small illusory sword chased after him and pierced through his primordial spirit. His terrified primordial spirit was still in the air when it started to slowly dissipate. All of this happened very quickly. Several Southern Army sentinels looked at this scene in shock. After a long time, their expressions changed from shock to joy. Behind them, Run rushed over with his group. He looked at the bald man who was nailed to the ground and his nascent soul that had yet to dissipate. He gulped with difficulty. At this moment, he deeply understood that the reason he was still standing here in one piece was all because he had a loose tongue back then. Li Mu's gaze swept over everyone. When it swept over the dragon girl, she trembled and immediately said, "My name is Ao Qingxin. My home is in the Southern Sea. I sneaked out. I didn't want to go against you, but someone stole my inner core and forced me to work for them." Chapter 508. Li Mu did not have time to pay attention to the dragon. He quickly walked to the sentries and used his magic power to check their bodies. When he withdrew his hand, Li Mu's face was gloomy. Out of the 10 sentries, 7 of them had their cultivation crippled, and 3 of them were seriously injured. Li Mu first used the Buddhist light to stabilize the injuries of the 3 seriously injured, and then gave them a few bottles of healing pills. The 7 sentries whose dantians were destroyed were even more troublesome to treat. Li Mu needed to refine a cauldron of heaven-level pills to rebuild their dantians. Fortunately, his storage space was very rich. Most of them were given to him by Huanji. It was only a matter of time before they recovered their cultivation. He had just arrived in the South County and had witnessed 2 border conflicts with his own eyes. It was enough to see how arrogant the border guards of the Shin Kingdom were. An hour later, Li Mu arrived at the main camp of the South Army under the lead of Song Xian and the others. The South Army had a total of 10 armies. The other 9 armies were led by the First Army. Here, Li Mu met the commander of the First Army of the South Army. This was a burly man. His cultivation was only at the 5th realm. When he saw Li Mu, he bowed to him and said, "Lord Li, I've heard a lot about you." Li Mu went straight to the point and said, "I'll skip the pleasantries. In the past few months, the people of the South County have been too weak. I'm here for this matter." Speaking of this, the commander of the South Army slammed his fist on the table and said, "These animals don't dare to fight us head-on, so they go around disturbing the people. Every time we arrive, it's already too late. The people are suffering because of them. Their whereabouts are unknown. In the past few months, the South Army has only caught a dozen of them. For this, several of our soldiers have also died." Li Mu asked, "Where are they?" Commander Zhang said, "In the prison." At this moment, a deputy general hurried into the tent and said, "General, people from the Shin Kingdom have come again. They're causing trouble outside and asking us to release their people." Commander Zhang said angrily, "King bullshit. If we let them go, would our soldiers have died for nothing?" There was a commotion outside the tent, and a dark-skinned man in strange clothes barged in. He spoke in a non-standard Great Zhou dialect and said loudly, You have no right to punish the people of Great Zhou. Even if they committed crimes in your country, they must be handed over to Great Zhou for punishment. This is the law set by your late emperor. Commander Zhang whispered into Li Mu's ear. Although this is the rule set by the previous emperor, we can't let this person go. Our soldiers can't die in vain. The Shen nation must pay the price. Li Mu walked in front of the Shen person, looked at him and lightly said, "The late emperor has been dead for 5 years. Now this rule has been changed. The Great Zhou is the celestial empire. If a foreigner commits a crime in the Great Zhou, his crime will be increased by 1 level." That Xingua man frowned and said, "Who are you? Do you think you can change a country's laws just because you say so?" Li Mu smiled and said, "I'm sorry, but it's true." He looked at Commander Zhang and said, "Bring the Shen nation prisoners here." Commander Zhang clasped his fist and ordered his men, "Bring them here." They walked out. Outside the Southern Army camp, there was a row of tombstones. Commander Zhang explained to Li Mu, "These are the soldiers of the Southern Army who sacrificed themselves over the years. I could only bury their bodies here." These tombstones were engraved with names and dates of birth. Li Mu looked at them. Judging from the dates of birth and death, some of the soldiers were only 18 or 19 years old when they sacrificed themselves. 13 Shen nation prisoners were brought out. Seeing dozens of their people standing outside, they thought they could go back. They smiled and were about to walk over, but they were held back by the Southern Army soldiers behind them. Li Mu looked back and said, "Bring them here." The 13 people kept resisting and struggling, but in the end, they were brought over and stood in front of these tombstones. Li Mu said indifferently, "Make them kneel." The 13 people stood straight, and none of them knelt. Li Mu looked at them, and an invisible aura came out of his body. The 13 people suddenly felt the pressure on their bodies double, as if a mountain was pressing down on them. They gritted their teeth and wanted to continue standing, but their backs bent. As the pressure on their heads increased, their knees also bent. In the end, there were only a dozen bang sounds, and all of them knelt on the ground. If they didn't kneel, that force would crush their bones. Seeing this, the Shen nation emissary led more than 10 attendants forward. Li Mu turned to look at them, and his aura swept out. The emissary and the others couldn't help but take a few steps back. They were locked in place by a terrifying aura. They stood in place, not daring to move, and sweat poured down their foreheads like rain. Commander Zhang, who was standing beside Li Mu, also felt this aura. He was extremely shocked. The legendary Lord Li was even more powerful than he had imagined. There was silence in front of the tent. Li Mu looked down at the first person kneeling and asked, "What crime did he commit?" A deputy general walked forward and said, "This person raped several women in the South Commandery." Li Mu took out the saber at the deputy general's waist. Using his finger as a pen, he drew a rune on the saber. Then he said, "In the Great Zhou, raping a woman is punished with 3 to 10 years in prison. If the circumstances are serious, you can be sentenced to death. You raped several women, so it's not too much to sentence you to death, right?" Under the pressure of that powerful aura, the Shen nation cultivator couldn't speak at all. If he opened his mouth, he would be crushed by this aura. He couldn't speak and he didn't have the chance to speak. Li Mu raised his saber, and a head rolled down. Hot blood rolled down from the headless body, dyeing the ground in front of him red. There were runes engraved on the saber. With one slash, the soul would scatter and the body would die. Even the primordial spirit and soul would not be left behind. Commander Zhang's eyelids twitched. Soon, there was only joy left in his eyes. He also wanted to do the same, but he didn't have Lord Li's courage. The Shen nation envoy's face was ashen. However, under the pressure of that aura, he couldn't take a step forward. It was even difficult for him to open his mouth. Ao Run's face was pale. He secretly hid behind Ao Qingxin. Ao Qingxin dared to show her toughness at the beginning, because she thought that no human would dare to kill a dragon. However, she didn't dare to take the risk now. Since just now, this seemingly gentle man had already killed 2 people in a row. He was so straightforward. He was simply an executioner who killed without batting an eye. Perhaps he really dared to kill a dragon. Ao Qingxin couldn't gamble with her life. She didn't dare to gamble with her life. At this moment, she only regretted. If she had known that the outside world was so terrifying, she would have agreed to her father's proposal. So what if she married that guy in the East Sea that she didn't like? It was better than running away from the marriage. After running away for half a year, her inner core was gone. Now she couldn't even keep her life. Tears flashed in her eyes. She said regretfully, "Father, I was wrong. Please come and save me." Li Mu cut down the first person, then looked at the second person kneeling and asked, "What crime did he commit?" The deputy general took a deep breath, gritted his teeth, and said, "He maliciously attacked our sentry. One of our sentry was sacrificed because of this person. Death penalty." Li Mu waved his saber again. Another headless body fell down. This person slaughtered several people in the border county and collected their souls for cultivation. Death penalty. This person, death penalty. As the 13 headless bodies fell to the ground, the surroundings of the military tent were silent. Whether it was the soldiers of the Southern Army or the emissary of the Shen country, they all held their breaths. It was so quiet that they could hear their own breathing and heartbeat. Soon, the young man from the Great Zhou spoke again. His voice wasn't loud, but it sent chills down the spines of the dozen or so people from the Shen country. From today onwards, if the guards of the Shen country cross the border without permission, their cultivation will be destroyed and they will be sent back. If they attack the outposts of the Great Zhou, if they provoke the soldiers of the Great Zhou, they will be killed without mercy. If they cause chaos in the Great Zhou, they will be killed without mercy. If they are found by the lake, they will be drowned in the lake. If they are found in the mountains, they will be hanged on a tree. No one will be spared. He withdrew his aura. The emissary of the Shen country and his entourage fell to the ground, their legs weak. Li Mu glanced at them and said to Commander Zhang, "Deport them out of the country and place the corpses of these 13 people on the border." The border between the Great Zhou and the Shen country was long. The sparse outposts couldn't stop the people of the Shen country. Only by using iron-blooded methods and killing them until they were scared could they put an end to the chaos in the South County. Since he started cultivating, Li Mu rarely had the desire to kill. However, when he looked at the tombstones in front of the big tent of the Southern Army and the soldiers of the Great Zhou who had sacrificed themselves, his killing intent rose like never before. He didn't know when it started, but he had already regarded himself as a part of the Great Zhou. He stood in front of the 13 headless corpses and turned around. His gaze happened to look at the pale Ao Run and Ao Qingxin. Under Li Mu's emotionless gaze, the flood dragon and the dragon trembled at the same time. Ao Qingxin trembled and hurriedly said, "No, don't kill me. I can guard the lake for you. And I can also be your mount. Don't you want to have a dragon as your mount?" These words didn't move Li Mu, but Ao Run shivered. All the hair on his body stood on end, and his soul was almost scared out of his body. If his master took this dragon as his mount, he would have nothing to do with it. In terms of strength, he was not as strong as this female dragon. In terms of status, he was a flood dragon, and the other party was a dragon. He was also inferior to a dragon. In terms of gender, his master was so lecherous. Whether it was day or night, he would definitely prefer to ride a female dragon instead of a male flood dragon. In this way, he would have no value at all. He knelt on the ground with a plop, hugging Li Mu's leg. With snot and tears he cried, "Master, don't do this. I've worked hard even if I didn't make any contributions. You can't forget the old flood dragon when you have a new one. You can ride this female dragon. I'll guard the lake. Don't kill me." Li Mu kicked him away and said angrily, "Who said I'm going to kill you?" After kicking Ao Run away, he looked at Ao Qingxin and said indifferently, "Although you were forced, this can't erase your crime. I'll punish you to be my mount for 3 years. Are you willing?" Ao Qingxin said without any hesitation, "Yes, I'm willing to be your mount." Although the dragon race had the dignity of the dragon race, life was always the most important thing. It was only being ridden by this terrifying man for 3 years. 3 years would pass very quickly. At that time, she would immediately fly into the sea. She wouldn't even want her inner core, and would never come out again. Li Mu glanced at her, and said, "Don't be my mount. Your master is someone else. You'll know when the time comes. He had once promised to catch a dragon for the empress to play with as a mount. This little female dragon was just right. With the empress's personality, she would probably be tired of playing with it after 3 years. At that time, he would give her back her freedom. It could be considered that he had fulfilled another promise to the empress. Hearing that she wasn't going to be his mount, Ao Qingxin felt a little comforted in her heart. She hoped that her master wasn't a man. It would be best if she was a beautiful young lady. Li Mu looked at the row of tombstones again. Looking at the unfamiliar names on them, he said to Commander Zhang, I want to build a tombstone for these heroes and engrave their names on it for future generations to revere. Commander Zhang nodded and said, I'll arrange it. But where should we put this tombstone? Li Mu thought for a moment, and said, put it at the border where the people of the Shen Kingdom enter. Great Zhou and the Shen Kingdom had been trading for many years. There was a checkpoint at the border of the South County. When the merchants of the Great Zhou left the border, the people of the Shen Kingdom entered. They had to pass through a small city. On this day, a huge stone tombstone flew through the air and landed in front of this small city located at the border of the Great Zhou and the Shen Kingdom. The stone tombstone was about 10 feet tall. There were mysterious patterns carved on it. There were also small words secretly carved on the tombstone. Under the stone tombstone, there were more than a dozen corpses of the people of the Shen Kingdom kneeling. The Shen Kingdom's guards had already gathered in front of the border, because more than a dozen of their own people had been killed. When they saw this scene, they were even more furious. Damn the people of the Zhou Kingdom! How dare they humiliate the soldiers of the Shen Kingdom! Our imperial court is too weak. If we send troops to the Great Zhou, our Shen Kingdom will soon become the most powerful country in the Zhou continent. The emperor of the Zhou Kingdom is actually a woman. How can a country with a woman as the emperor be the most powerful country in the Zhou continent? This title clearly belongs to our Shen Kingdom. They actually humiliated our soldiers like this. I swear, I will kill 10 people of the Zhou Kingdom to avenge them. But the Zhou Kingdom said that if we cross the border, our cultivation will be crippled. If we violate the laws of the Zhou Kingdom, we will be killed without mercy. You coward. This is for the glory of the Shen Kingdom. So what if you die? 2 figures stood within the borders of the Great Zhou. All kinds of unbearable words entered their ears. Commander Zhang said, I don't know where these people of the Shen Kingdom get their confidence from. If it wasn't for the fact that war is a waste of manpower and resources, our dynasty has always maintained peace. The Great Zhou Iron Cavalry would have already trampled the Shen Kingdom. Li Mu looked at the furious people of the Shen Kingdom and said lightly, looks like this won't scare them. Commander Zhang said, I have dealt with them for many years. They are just like this. Not only are they blindly confident, but they are also stubborn. Li Mu thought for a while and said, looks like just beheading them isn't enough. If even beheading them wasn't enough, what could be more terrifying than beheading them? Commander Zhang asked doubtfully, what else does Lord Li plan to do? Li Mu took out the corpse sex sound transmission magic tool and channeled his mana. After waiting for a long time, Chen Shi's respectful voice came from the other side. What orders does Grand Elder have? Li Mu said lightly, bring 2 elders and come to the southern county of the Great Zhou to find me. Chapter 509. It would take Chen Shi and the others at least 7 days to get here from Qianhu country. Taking advantage of these few days, Li Mu refined most of the spiritual herbs in his storage space into pills and distributed them to the injured soldiers of the Southern Army. They helped the soldiers of the Southern Army who had their cultivation crippled rebuild their dantian. Although the guards of the Shen country were stubborn, they could see more than a dozen corpses on the border as long as they looked up. It was impossible for them not to be afraid. In recent days, the number of provocations from the people of the Shen country across the border had decreased by more than half. However, there was still a portion of people who were not frightened by Li Mu. Instead, they became even more aggressive and attacked more than a dozen outposts together. When the reinforcements arrived, most of the time, there were only injured soldiers of the Southern Army. The people of the Shen country had long fled. Li Mu asked Ao Run and Ao Qingxin to patrol the border for a few days, but they only caught 3 people. There was no way to stop this phenomenon. It was easy to be a thief but hard to guard against a thief. No one knew where their next target would be. The only thing they could do was to kill them one by one. They would kill until they were completely afraid, and would naturally stop. A few days later, Li Mu met Chen Qi, Han Shisan, and Sun Qi in the tent. These 3 were the 3 strongest elders of the corpse sect. They were also quite accomplished in the path of refining corpses. The 3 of them knelt on one knee and bowed to Li Mu with cupped fists. They said loudly, "Greetings, Grand Elder." Li Mu gestured for them to stand up and asked, "How is the situation of the demon country now?" Chen Qi said, "Ever since the last battle, the Tianlang country has been holed up in their territory and hasn't made any moves. The Qianhu country is absorbing the surrounding demons." Li Mu asked again, "What has Phantom Princess been doing recently?" Chen Qi said, "Ever since Her Majesty returned from the Great Zhou, she has been in seclusion." After asking them a few questions, Li Mu said again, "I called you here this time because I have a mission for you. Follow me." Li Mu brought the 3 of them to the Southern Army's Martyrs Monument. At the same time, he asked Commander Zhang to bring the 3 guards of the Shen Kingdom who had attacked the Southern Army's outpost and injured the Southern Army's outpost. The stone stele was erected near the border between the 2 countries. The river was the boundary between the 2 countries. On one side was the Great Zhou, and on the other side was the Shen Kingdom. Both countries had a large number of troops stationed on both sides of the river. When Li Mu and his people gathered on the north bank, the Shen Kingdom's guards on the other side could not help but watch. What do these Zhou people want to do? What do they want to do to Raj, Ka, and Sharma? No, those Zhou people raised their blades at them. Could it be that he wants to kill them? On the north bank, a deputy general said loudly in the official language of the Shen nation, "These 3 people crossed the border and attacked our Southern Army's outpost. They injured our soldiers and should be executed according to the law. Take this as a warning and don't repeat their mistakes. Execute them." Swish, swish, swish. The executioner waved his blade, and the 3 Shen Kingdom's guards were beheaded. Blood sprayed on the ground below the monument. Since the time of the previous emperor of the Great Zhou, the Shen Kingdom had enjoyed many privileges in the Great Zhou. One of the most important privileges was that the Great Zhou had no right to punish the Shen Kingdom's citizens. No matter what crimes the Shen Kingdom soldiers and civilians committed in the Great Zhou, they would be handed over to the Shen Kingdom's imperial court for punishment. The Shen Kingdom naturally would not punish its own citizens. In the past, it would only put on a show and release them. But just now, they had seen with their own eyes that their friends and compatriots were executed by the Zhou Kingdom. Not only did this not frighten them, it made them even angrier. "We will settle this score with you sooner or later. Raj, Ka, and Sharma will not die in vain. We will avenge you. Just you wait. I will drag 10 times the number of Zhou Kingdom citizens to accompany you in death." A large number of Shen Kingdom's soldiers looked across the river. Their voices were filled with grief and indignation. Then another scene occurred across the river that they could not understand. They did not know when it started, but a gray fog suddenly enveloped the corpses of Raj, Ka, and Sharma. Moreover, it continued to spread. After being killed by the Zhou Kingdom's people, the dozen or so corpses of the Shen Kingdom's guards who were kneeling in front of the monument were also enveloped by the gray fog. The gray fog was deathly silent. The noisy Shen Kingdom's guards on the other side of the river also slowly quieted down. The gray fog gave them a strange feeling from the bottom of their hearts. A terrifying atmosphere spread among the Shen Kingdom's army. Ao Run looked at the gray fog from afar, and felt extremely uncomfortable. He carefully asked Li Mu, "Master, what are they doing?" Li Mu lightly said, "Refining corpses." Ao Run took a deep breath. These Shen Kingdom's people were too pitiful. Even after death, they could not rest in peace and were even refined into zombies. Although he did not sympathize with these people who had no bottom line compared to him, he still could not help but feel fear from the bottom of his heart. What made him even more afraid was that the way his master looked at those corpses just now was very familiar to him. After Ao Run carefully recalled, His body could not help but tremble. Wasn't that the way his master looked at him when he first captured him? Could it be that at that time, his master also intended to refine him into a corpse? Thinking of this, Ao Run felt a lingering fear. If it was not for his quick-wittedness at that time, perhaps he would have already become an obedient flood dragon corpse. A sense of fear spread throughout his body. Ao Run's legs went soft, and he directly knelt down. Li Mu looked at him and asked, "What are you doing?" Ao Run swallowed a mouthful of saliva and knelt on the ground. He conveniently said, "Master, are your legs sore? Let me help you massage them." Ao Qingxin also hurriedly ran over and stood behind Li Mu. He said, "Let me help you massage your shoulders." The longer she stayed by this man's side, the more terrifying things she saw. In the past, she thought that death would be the end of everything. She did not expect that death was not the end. She could not imagine that after death, the corpses would still have to suffer such torture. Beside Commander Zhang, a secretary's throat moved. He asked, "General, they are already dead. Is it too inhumane for us to do this?" Commander Zhang looked at him and coldly asked, "Humanity? What is humanity? Humanity is our soldiers, our people. Do we have to endlessly suffer the harassment of the Shen Kingdom's people? Let me tell you what humanity is. Humanity is to do our best to protect the people of our Great Zhou. Anyone who dares to offend our Great Zhou will have to pay a painful price. Even if they die, their corpses will continue to atone for their crimes." The secretary swallowed a mouthful of saliva and lowered his head. He did not ask any more questions. 2 hours later, on the south bank, hundreds of Shen Kingdom's guards waited anxiously. The gray fog on the other side of the bank finally dissipated. In the gray fog, besides the 3 Great Zhou people, there were also a dozen figures standing in neat rows. Their bodies exuded a strange aura. When the Shen Kingdom's guards saw these people, their expressions changed greatly. "Is that Sharma? He was clearly dead. How did he come back to life? Raj and Kadi are also inside. What happened to them?" "Ganesh Sutter, the dead have all come back to life. What did the Great Zhou people do to them? Is that Lord Bharat? He was a 5th realm expert 3 years ago. He actually died at the hands of the Great Zhou people. It's too scary. They are already dead, but they can't rest in peace." At this time, the expressions of the Shen Kingdom's guards had changed from anger to fear. Their friends and companions could not rest in peace after their deaths. They had become such terrifying existences. This was even more frightening than the war with the Great Zhou. Chen Shi and the other 2 shook the bells in their hands. The zombies refined from the corpses of the Shen Kingdom's prisoners hopped away with them. What was going on during these 2 hours was only the initial sacrificial refining. Only after all the sacrificial refining was completed would the zombies be able to unleash their strongest strength. Li Mu looked at the reactions of the Shen Kingdom's people on the other side of the bank, and turned to leave. He wanted to refine those people into zombies in front of them. He wanted them to see clearly that the consequences of invading the Great Zhou were even more terrifying than death. In the tent, Li Mu said to Commander Zhang, "Have the army's secretary write an official document, and have the South County's local government post it everywhere in the city. In the future, every time an invader is killed, everyone must be informed." 7 days later, the sentries of the South Army's various outposts reported that the Shen Kingdom's people did not make any more movements. There were also no disturbances in the counties. This series of thunderous methods finally completely suppressed the Shen Kingdom's people. Li Mu asked the Empress through the spirit conch. In the ancestral temple, the psychic power cauldron in the South County shone brightly again. Although it had not returned to normal, it was only a matter of time. After severely punishing the people of the Shen Kingdom, the psychic power of the people of the South County would greatly increase. As long as the stability of the South County could be maintained, the matter of the psychic power could be resolved. Although he had only been in the South County for less than half a month, and had already resolved these 2 problems, Li Mu did not plan to go back just like that. He could not swallow the anger of the Shen Kingdom. Great Zhou did not have any other thoughts about the Shen Kingdom. Firstly, Great Zhou's territory was large enough, and did not have much interest in occupying the Shen Kingdom. Otherwise, the Shen kingdom would have been incorporated into Great Zhou's territory 100 years ago. Secondly, the Yong kingdom, the Jing kingdom, the Liang kingdom, and the other kingdoms had similar cultures with Great Zhou. They shared a common language, and it was difficult to distinguish the citizens of each country from their appearance. However, the Shen kingdom was different. The appearance of the people of the Shen kingdom was very different from that of the other countries, and their cultural customs were also very different. To the countries of Zhuzhou, they were a foreign race. Great Zhou only wanted to protect its own territory, and had no interest in occupying the land of a foreign race. However, since the establishment of Great Zhou, the Shen kingdom had been tirelessly testing the boundaries of death. Whenever Great Zhou was in trouble, the Shen kingdom would take advantage of the situation and disturb the psychic power of the people of the South County. Although it would not cause much harm to Great Zhou, it was disgusting enough. Li Mu could not lead troops to attack the Shen kingdom. After all, although the Shen kingdom's strength was not as strong as Great Zhou's, it was not a pushover. Although Great Zhou could win, it would also give other people with bad intentions an opportunity to take advantage of. Once there were enemies in many places, no matter how powerful an empire was, it could be worn down. However, Li Mu could not swallow this anger. This matter needed to be considered at length. There was still one more thing to do. Li Mu sat in the tent and said, "Qing Xian, come in." As soon as he finished speaking, a figure rushed in. Ao Qing Xian stood in the tent nervously, waiting for Li Mu's orders. Li Mu looked up at her and asked, "You said that your Naiden was stolen by someone in the Shen kingdom?" Ao Qing Xian immediately raised her right hand and said, "I swear that what I said is true." Li Mu did not doubt her words. There was no doubt about the strength of the dragon race. If her Naiden was still there, Li Mu might not have been able to take her down so easily. Giving the Empress a dragon without a Naiden would show that he did not take her seriously. Before giving it to the Empress, he needed to find her Naiden first. Li Mu asked, "Who stole your Naiden? Where is he now? How strong is he?" Ao Qing Xian looked up at Li Mu and was stunned for a moment. Then she said, "I don't know where he is now, but I can sense the location of the Naiden. His strength should be at the 6th realm of you humans." Li Mu walked to her side and said calmly, "Take me to him." Shen Kingdom, Southern Bang. Ao Qing Xian sat on a flying boat in the sky. It was hard to describe what she was feeling. Although she had fallen into the hands of a human again, this human did not do anything to her. Instead, he took her to find her Naiden. This made her, who thought that she had fallen into the claws of a demon, feel quite disappointed. Li Mu stood at the bow of the boat. He did not turn his head and asked, "How far is it?" Ao Qing Xian pointed ahead and said, "It's just ahead. I can sense that we are getting closer and closer to the Naiden." Li Mu accelerated the flying boat. When they reached the sky above a certain plane, the flying boat suddenly stopped and rapidly descended. Outside a certain village, in the dense grass, a woman's screams and cries for help could be heard. The 5 men laughed obscenely and violently tore off her clothes. The woman's heart-wrenching voice was filled with despair. Finally, it alerted a family at the entrance of the village. A man ran out and stood outside the bushes. He shouted, "What are you doing?" The 5 men looked back at him and pointed at the woman on the grass. The man looked at her exposed skin, and a lustful light flashed in his eyes. He took off his long robe and slowly walked in. When the woman saw this, her eyes were filled with despair. However, just as the 6 men were about to tear off the last layer of her clothes, their bodies suddenly left the ground and slowly floated in the air. A young man and woman slowly landed on the ground. Li Mu reached out and a piece of clothing appeared in his hand. The clothing automatically flew over and covered the woman. The woman hurriedly used the clothing to cover her body. Li Mu looked at the 6 men. They felt a sharp pain between their legs and then fainted. Ao Qing Xian stood behind Li Mu and secretly sized him up. She realized that she could not see through this man. The Great Zhou and the Shen Kingdom were clearly enemies. The people of the Shen Kingdom had done so many terrible things in the Great Zhou. He killed the people of the Shen Kingdom cleanly without even blinking. Yet he was willing to save this woman from the Shen Kingdom. She did not know what he was thinking. Alicia, Alicia. A man's voice came from afar. The woman used the clothing Li Mu gave her to wrap her body, and ran into the distance. Soon she came back with another man. She knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Li Mu and Ao Qingxian in gratitude. Before coming to the Shen Kingdom, Li Mu had already learned the language of the Shen Kingdom through the jade slip that Commander Zhang gave him. For cultivators like them, there was no language barrier at all. Li Mu did not say anything in the face of their gratitude. He took Ao Qingxian and flew back into the sky. He killed the people of the Shen Kingdom for the sake of the soldiers and innocent people of the Great Zhou. He saved this woman from the Shen Kingdom only because of his own conscience. However, before he left, he took another look at the young man. A strange look flashed across his eyes. Chapter 510. On the flying boat, Ao Qingxian seemed to have sensed something. He said to Li Mu, "That person is very strange." Li Mu asked casually, "What did you see?" Ao Qingxian said, "Spiritual qi. He has gathered a lot of spiritual qi." Li Mu stood at the bow of the boat and looked down. Under the influence of Old Wang, he had read a lot of books. Of course, what he saw was not only spiritual qi. For a person who had never cultivated before to have such dense spiritual qi around him, it could only mean that he had a special physique. It was very likely that he was a rare innate spiritual body. As the name implied, he could use his body to attract spiritual qi. This was a physique more suitable for cultivation than the 5 elements physique, pure yin and pure yang. Qian Jingko was an innate spiritual body. With this talent and the inheritance of his sect, he was able to become the headmaster of the Fulu school. If that young man from the Shen Kingdom was born in the Great Zhou, he would definitely be a genius that all the major sects would fight over. Unfortunately, he was born in the Shen Kingdom. Looking at his clothes, he should be the lowest of the low. The Shen Kingdom's royal family divided the people into 4 classes. The cultivators of the sects and the royal family were the first class, the nobles were the first class, and the merchants were the first class. The common people were the lowest class. The common people could not receive education and could not cultivate. No matter how talented they were, it was futile. Li Mu had already realized that although talent could make cultivation twice the result with half the effort, the decisive factors were one's hard work, two's luck, and of course, the most important was the inheritance. A person with an innate spiritual body cultivating for 100 years was not as good as a person with mediocre talent receiving a strand of emperor's qi. After all, a person's 100 years of hard work could not compare to the years of hard work of hundreds of millions of people in the Great Zhou. On the path of cultivation, most of the so-called top geniuses would eventually become ordinary people. He quickly put this matter to the back of his mind. At this time, Ao Qingxian suddenly pointed to a short mountain in front of them and said excitedly, "I feel it. My inner core is there." Li Mu stood on the flying boat and looked at the short mountain in the distance. At the top of the hill, there was a magnificent temple. A row of stone steps extended from the top of the hill to the foot of the hill. On the stone steps, there were many people slowly climbing up. Every few steps, they would kneel down and kowtow. From their bodies, there was a faint aura of telekinesis. Within the Shen Kingdom, sects flourished. This was the origin of Buddhism, and countless sects flourished here. Even the Shen Kingdom's royal family used sects to control the Shen Kingdom. Although the Shen Kingdom was not as big as the Great Zhou, it had a large population, and was very suitable for the development of sections. This was obviously the location of a sect. Before Li Mu and Qingxian could get close, a figure suddenly flew out from the temple. It was a tall and sturdy man with bulging muscles. He didn't have any hair on his head and held a Buddhist staff in his hand. He frowned at Ao Weishin and asked, "Evil dragon, what are you doing here instead of guarding the lake?" Ao Qingxian stood on the flying boat, turned around and looked at Li Mu, then summoned up his courage and said, "Give me back my inner core." The bald man sneered and said, "If you want the inner core, come and get it yourself." Qingxian looked at Li Mu again. Li Mu said indifferently, "If he wants you to get it, go get it yourself. Don't worry, I will watch over you from the side." When she had her knight in, she wasn't this baldy's opponent. Now that she had lost her Knighten, she couldn't beat him. But at this moment, she didn't have any other choice. She could only summon 2 pitchforks and bite the bullet to attack the Baldy. Li Mu stretched out his hand, and the shrunken Dao bell floated in his palm and kept spinning. Go. Li Mu waved his hand, and the Dao bell suddenly flew to Qing Xian and merged with her body. Qing Xian only felt that something had happened to her body, but the bald man's staff was already smashing towards her. She could only raise her pitchforks to block. Clang. The staff and pitchforks collided, and there was a deafening sound. Qing Xian's body floated in the air, but the bald man was bounced back with his staff. Qing Xian was stunned for a moment. Then she spat out a mouthful of dragon's breath without hesitation. The bald man hurriedly responded. He waved his sleeves and hid his body behind his wide monk's robes. But this treasured robe was still burned with 2 big holes. He was shocked and angry, and his hands formed a seal. At this moment, the young man's voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Formation. As soon as he said this, his body was suddenly bound by the power of heaven and earth. He couldn't move, and the spell he was about to cast was also interrupted. Although he immediately used his spiritual power to break free, the dragon girl didn't let go of this opportunity. A pitchfork pierced towards his head. A golden light burst out from the top of his head and bounced the pitchfork away, but he was also injured. Blood flowed down from the top of his head, blurring his vision. Ever since he stepped into the 6th level, he hadn't been injured for a long time. At this moment, his anger wasn't on the dragon girl, but on the man behind her. If this person hadn't been causing trouble at the side, he would have taken down the dragon girl long ago. He formed a seal with one hand and pushed a palm towards Li Mu. In the void in front of the two, an illusory palm print suddenly appeared and pressed down on Li Mu. At the same time, the space Li Mu was in seemed to be completely sealed. Palm prints appeared in all directions around him, sealing off all his escape routes. When the palm prints arrived, Li Mu's body suddenly disappeared. The mini palm prints resisted and melted, and Li Mu's body appeared again. As long as the opponent wasn't at the 7th level, or the peak of the 6th level, he could escape into the Demon Emperor's space at any time to avoid the enemy's attack. The bald man's attack didn't hurt Li Mu, and Ao Shoshin was already charging over with her pitchforks. While he was dealing with the dragon, there were thunderous roars above his head, strong winds blowing, and thousands of swords shooting out. He was in a sorry state, and his treasured robes were already riddled with holes. The young man's spell was strange, and he didn't know what was up with the dragon girl. Although her attacks weren't much stronger, her defense was more than 10 times stronger. He couldn't break through her defense at all. If this continued, he might be exhausted to death by the man and dragon here. He had originally prepared that dragon inner core for the treasure hunt at the bottom of the sea. Now it seemed like he had to return it. He waved his hand, and a white inner core the size of a pigeon egg flew out, and was swallowed by Ao Shoshin. The inner core returned to her body, and her aura soared. Soon she reached the peak of the 5th level. The bald man regulated his body as he said, "I've given you the item. You can leave now, right?" Li Mu didn't think of directly killing this bald man. Which 6th level elite didn't have a trump card? He couldn't take him down in a short time. Moreover, if he stayed in a stalemate with him for too long, it would be very disadvantageous for them in the Shen Nation's territory if he summoned the other elites of the Shen Nation. However, it wasn't his style to just walk away like this. Li Mu looked at him and said calmly, "You snatched someone else's item, and it's fine just to return it?" The bald man asked in a low voice, "What else do you want?" Li Mu said, "You bullied my people. You have to pay the price, right?" The bald man's face darkened. After a moment of silence, he waved his hand at Li Mu, and a white light shot out. Li Mu reached out to catch it, and a jade scroll appeared in his hand. The bald man said, "This is a map of an ancient secret realm that I obtained in my early years. I'll give it to you." Li Mu used his psychic power to check the jade scroll, and found that there was indeed a map imprinted in it. The location marked on the map should be in the Southern Sea. No wonder this bald man wanted Shoshin's inner core. Without the dragon inner core, it was very difficult for humans to move in the deep sea. Every time they dived a certain distance, They would need to use their transcendence energy to resist the water pressure. Below several thousand meters, 6th-level elites would need to use all their transcendence energy to barely move. If they encountered any threat, they would be doomed. He kept the jade scroll and said, "Shoshin, let's go." Ao Shoshin, who had regained her inner core, was in a good mood. She immediately flew onto Li Mu's flying ship. The bald man looked at the flying ship leaving, and his face darkened. He turned into a ray of light again, and flew into the temple. The believers on the mountain path did not know that a great battle had happened in the sky. They were still climbing the mountain and praying devoutly. On the flying ship, Li Mu handed the jade scroll to Shoshin. After Shoshin checked it, she nodded and said, "That is indeed the Southern Sea. However, it is not easy to find. The sea is very big, much bigger than the countries on land. It is very, very difficult to find a place in the sea, and it is also very easy to encounter danger." The ancient secret realm was indeed very attractive to Li Mu. There would often be Dao arts inheritances from the previous era there. However, Li Mu did not have the time to look for them now. He still had to settle the matter of the Shen country. The arrogant group of Shen country people at the border was temporarily intimidated. However, according to their temperament, it would not be long before they would forget this painful memory. The flying ship landed outside a city in the northern bang of the Shen country. Ao Shoshin asked Li Mu in confusion, "Are we not going back?" Li Mu said indifferently, "There is no hurry." In the past, his understanding of the Shen country was all from the mouths of others. Since he had come to the Shen country this time, he wanted to see for himself what kind of country it was. The difference in appearance between the two of them and the Shen country people was too great. Li Mu and her changed a little, and they did not seem that special. In the small city, Li Mu and Shoshin walked side by side. Even though she had changed into the clothes of the Shen country people and hid her dragon horns, it was still difficult to hide her natural beauty. Walking on the street, from time to time, men would cast strange looks at her. It was human nature to love beauty. For a woman like her, walking on the streets of any city in the Great Zhou, there would be a high number of people turning their heads. However, the behavior of the people of the Great Zhou and the people of the Shen country were completely different. When the people of the Great Zhou saw a beautiful woman, most of them looked at her with admiration. When they were discovered by a woman, they would also look away in embarrassment. However, the people of the Shen country people would not do that. They would silently look at a woman with naked eyes. If it was just one or two, it would be fine. However, when most of the men on the street looked at her with such eyes, even the powerful dragon girl hid behind Li Mu. Although they had met many good people, evil had become the norm. The few good people were easy to be ignored. After personally experiencing the local customs of Shen, Li Mu released the flying boat again. The two of them stood on the boat. The flying boat quickly flew across the sky, heading toward the southern county of Great Zhou. Cheng Xian stood behind Li Mu. At a certain moment, the flying boat suddenly stopped. Her body leaned forward and bumped into Li Mu. She hugged her chest and asked nervously, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Li Mu stood at the bow of the boat and looked into the distance. His face was filled with shock. Even standing here, he could feel that the power of heaven and earth in that direction had suddenly become extremely violent. Even though Li Mu was experienced and knowledgeable, he could not imagine what kind of supernatural power could trigger such a huge amount of power of heaven and earth. With a heart full of doubts, Li Mu controlled the flying boat again and sped forward. Chapter 511. Shen Kingdom, North Kingdom. In a village with only a few dozen families. In the Shen Kingdom, the villages and tribes were self-governed. All the affairs in the village, including the villagers' life and death, were in the hands of the village elders. Although this made a small number of people have too much power, it also saved a lot of manpower for the Shen Kingdom's imperial court. At this moment, a murder case was being tried in this village. Outside the simple, thatched courtroom, dozens of villagers stood outside, craning their necks to watch. Inside the courtroom, two strong men were holding down a skinny man. The skinny man was still struggling. One of them hit the back of his leg with a thick wooden stick, forcing him to kneel down heavily. An old man with white hair and beard wearing a hat sat in the chair in front. He held a wooden stick that symbolized power, and knocked it hard on the ground. With a dark expression, he gritted his teeth and said, "Aragu, you actually dared to murder my nephew Tuoji. According to the village rules, I will now sentence you to death by stoning. What do you have to say?" Aragu was pressed to the ground and still struggled. His eyes were bloodshot as he said with extreme grief and indignation, "Tuoji wanted to rape my fiancé and tripped and got injured. You didn't punish him, but you want to kill me. God is watching. Everything you did when you were alive will go to hell after you die." The old man's eyes flashed coldly. "You said Tuoji was injured, but someone clearly saw you hit him. Bring the witnesses here." Two men walked in and pointed at the skinny man kneeling on the ground. "It's him. We saw him hit Tuoji with our own eyes." The skinny man's eyes were filled with grief. These two men wanted to rape his fiancée, but the Immortals destroyed their manhood. They held a grudge and took revenge on him. Right now he was filled with endless anger, but he couldn't fight back. The old man knocked his cane hard on the ground and said sternly, "Aragu, as a lowly peasant, you actually dared to hurt a noble. According to the law, you should be sentenced to death. Now I sentence you to death by stoning. Men, take him away and execute him immediately." The skinny man was taken out and pushed into a pit. Someone had filled the hole with sand and soil. Everything below his waist was buried in the ground, and he couldn't move. Not far away, there was a pile of rocks. The big ones were the size of fists, and the small ones were the size of a baby's head. These were used for the execution. When someone was sentenced to be stoned, the villagers would line up to throw stones at him until he was completely dead. This kind of punishment was very cruel. But the cruelest thing was that the victim's family and friends were also required to participate in the execution. Just as Aragu was about to be executed, a woman rushed over crazily and shouted, "Aragu, Aragu!" However, as soon as she approached, she was forcefully pulled away. A man limped over to the sand pit. Half of Aragu's body was already buried in the ground, and his hands were tied behind his back. The man had a mocking expression on his face. He patted Aragu's face heavily and said, "Aragu, don't worry and die. I will help you take good care of Alicia. Ah, you lowly peasant, let go." Two of Toji's fingers were bitten. Cold sweat poured down his forehead. He kicked Aragu's chest. When he pulled his hand back, his fingers were bleeding. He wrapped his injured fingers with a handkerchief and strode out of the sand pit. Gritting his teeth, he said, "Smash him to death. Smash him to death." The execution began. Everyone picked up stones from the ground and threw them at the sand pit. Buried in the sand, Aragu couldn't dodge. Soon his head was bleeding. Toji still couldn't vent his anger. He ordered the two men behind him, "Take Alicia to my house. I want this peasant to see the consequences of offending a noble." His two men received the order and forcefully dragged Alicia away in front of dozens of villagers. Buried in the sand pit, Araga's eyes were bloodshot. He roared like a beast, but he was trapped in the sand pit and couldn't move at all. On the other side, Alicia used all her strength to break free from the two men. She looked back at Aragu and said sadly, "Aragu, Alicia will still be your wife in the next life." With that, she slammed her head against the stone wall. A blood-red flower bloomed on the wall. Alicia's body fell limply to the ground. Toji's subordinate reached out and touched Alicia's nose. He stood up and said in disbelief, "Lord Toji, she's dead." Toji waved his hand unhappily and said angrily, "This stupid woman. So what if she's dead? She's just a peasant. Drag her down and bury her later." With that, he crossed his arms and watched coldly as everyone executed Aragu. After Alicia committed suicide, the figure in the sandpit let out a roar and stood there in a daze, not moving at all. Hard rocks fell on him, but he didn't dodge or dodge. He just stared blankly at Alicia's corpse. At a certain moment, all of the executioners, including Toji, suddenly shivered inexplicably. The surrounding temperature seemed to drop. They felt as if a huge rock was pressing down on their chests. In the sky, the clouds changed. A gust of wind blew on the ground, blowing sand and rocks. Everyone couldn't care less about the execution. They all covered their faces with their sleeves and hid behind the stone wall. In the sand pit, half of Araga's body was buried. He broke the ropes on his hands and pushed himself out of the sand pit with both hands. His eyes turned blood red. He took a step forward and disappeared. The next time he appeared, he was already in front of Toji. Toji opened his mouth wide in shock. Before he could say anything, Araga punched him in the head. Bang! Toji's head exploded like a watermelon. With 2 more bangs, his 2 subordinates also died on the spot. Seeing this, everyone fled in terror. Araga walked to Alicia's corpse. The blood in his eyes slowly faded. He squatted down slowly and hugged his head in pain, choking with sobs. Soon a figure flew out of the village. It was a man in a white robe. He walked in the air. When the villagers saw him, they all knelt down and shouted, "High Priest!" The man pointed with both hands. The ground under Araga's feet suddenly became extremely soft, sinking him into it. Then the ground became hard again. Only Araga's head was left outside. The man in the white robe stood in the air and said sternly, "How dare you, lowly commoner? How dare you?" Under the ground, Araga took a deep breath. The ground that trapped him split open, and he jumped out. Seeing this, the man in the white robe's expression changed. He grabbed a spear on his back and stabbed it at Aragu. However, Aragu reached out and grabbed it. He used a bit of force and took the spear from the man in the white robe. He bent it and threw it aside. The man in the white robe couldn't do this himself. Seeing this, he was scared out of his wits and fled as if his life depended on it. Just then 2 more figures descended from the sky. Li Mu didn't expect to see this young man from the Shen nation again. What surprised him was that when they first met, he was just a mortal. Now he already had the aura of a 4th realm. It seemed that the change in the power of heaven and earth just now was because of this person. Although this young man didn't cultivate, he had clearly activated the power of heaven and earth to fill his body. Back then, Xiaoyu used the incantation to move heaven and earth and instantly advanced to the 5th realm. This young man from the Shen nation's situation was completely because of his special constitution. His innate spiritual body awakened once, and it was also his only chance to fill his body. However, because he didn't cultivate and didn't know anything about cultivation, he only had the realm but didn't have the strength of a 4th realm. After the young man glanced at Li Mu and Ao Qingxin, he looked down at the woman's corpse on the ground. Without hesitation, he slammed his head against the stone wall beside him. Boom! With a crash, the stone wall collapsed. He was still standing in the same place. He lowered his head and looked at his hand, then touched his head. His face was blank. Li Mu asked in the language of the Shen nation, "What are you doing?" The young man looked at Li Mu with sorrow in his eyes. He said, "Alicia is dead. I want to go with her. Even if we become ghosts, we want to be together." Alicia was the woman from the Shen nation that Li Mu had casually saved last time. At this moment, her corpse was lying on the ground in front of Li Mu. Li Mu looked at the corpse on the ground and said to the young man, "Since you two love each other so much, you don't have to die." He stretched out 2 fingers and swiped them in front of the young man's eyes. Aragu realized that he had seen Alicia again. He ran over excitedly and wanted to hug her. However, he passed through her body. Li Mu walked over and said, "She's just a ghost now. She needs to cultivate before she can reform her body. Forget it. Since we're fated to meet again, I'll help you again." He formed a seal with his hands. After a wave of the power of heaven and earth, Alicia's body slowly solidified. She was already dead. Li Mu couldn't resurrect her. He could only help her reform her body temporarily. The man and woman hugged each other again. They were very excited. Some things didn't discriminate between countries. Li Mu was moved by the feelings of this man and woman. Since he was already meddling in other people's business, he might as well help them to the end. Li Mu planned to teach them cultivation. With Araga's talent, it would be a waste if he didn't cultivate. Although Alicia didn't have much talent, as long as she cultivated to the 3rd realm, they could be a normal couple. He touched their foreheads with his finger and transmitted the relevant information into their minds. "Thank you, benefactor." The couple knelt on the ground again. and kowtowed to Li Mu to thank him. Araga kowtowed a few times. He looked up and asked Li Mu, "Benefactor, you're from the Great Zhou, right?" Li Mu nodded and didn't deny it. Araga said longingly, "I heard that everyone in the Great Zhou is equal. If the nobles break the law, they'll be punished. Anyone can cultivate. Women will also be protected. Compared to the Great Zhou, this is a kingdom of demons." Li Mu said, "The Great Zhou wasn't as beautiful as you said from the beginning. It's because of the wise empress leadership that the Great Zhou of today became what it is today." Arago lowered his head and said, "Our empress will only promulgate laws that benefit the nobles. They won't care about lowly people like us." Li Mu looked at him and said meaningfully, "You have to create a happy life with your own hands. If all the oppressed people of the Shen Kingdom unite, they can also change the world." After saying that, he said lightly, "Happy, let's go." Two streams of light streaked across the sky again. Arago watched them leave. When the light disappeared from his sight, he looked down at his hands and muttered, "All the oppressed people unite." When he returned to the South County, Li Mu already had a preliminary idea about the Shen Kingdom. Although the two countries often had conflicts recently, neither the Great Zhou nor the Shen Kingdom would easily start a war with the other country. The Shen Kingdom didn't have the strength to start a war. Although the Great Zhou had the strength, there was no need to start a war. After all, for a long time, the national policy of the Great Zhou was to develop peacefully. It was best to let the Shen Kingdom fall into chaos. Logically speaking, with the situation in the Shen Kingdom, countless people were widely oppressed. When they were oppressed to the extreme, they would resist. Such a regime would be difficult to stabilize. However, the most oppressed people in the Shen Kingdom were mostly limited by sections. The slave mentality was deeply rooted. They were willing to be oppressed and naturally wouldn't resist. Moreover, they couldn't cultivate. Even if they wanted to resist, they didn't have the strength to do so. What they needed was guidance. Although these people didn't have the strength, their psychokinesis was very useful. Li Mu could tell that Araga was different from the other people at the bottom. However, he was too weak and couldn't be of much use for the time being. He had only planted a seed in Araga's heart. Now he needed someone with absolute strength and ability to infiltrate the Shen Kingdom and complete this matter. There were many experts that the consecration department could mobilize. They could fight, but no one in the entire consecration department could take on the responsibility of guiding the oppressed citizens of the Shen nation. If it really couldn't be done, Li Mu would have to do it himself. However, unless it was absolutely necessary, Li Mu didn't want to do it himself. This meant that he would have to stay in the Shen Kingdom forever. This was something Li Mu was more resistant to. Speaking of which, the officials in the imperial court were the most suitable for this kind of thing. Their cultivation might not be very high, but they had been in the imperial court for many years. They were all old foxes. They definitely had their ways of doing this kind of thing. However, it would be difficult for them to gain a foothold in the Shen Kingdom if they didn't have the strength. This matter could only be discussed at length. The matter in the South County was temporarily settled. Li Mu left Ao Run here to ensure that the border waterways were safe. He returned to the divine capital, with Cheng Xian. He planned to discuss it with the Empress slowly. However, before they reached the divine capital, Li Mu's expression suddenly changed on the flying boat. Just now, he suddenly felt that one of his soul clones attached to the 8 realms 6 demonic corpses suddenly lost connection with his primordial spirit. Immediately after, the second soul clones also mysteriously disappeared. Li Mu left the 10 demonic corpses with Phantom Princess. Although Li Mu couldn't use his soul clones to control them, there was always an extremely weak connection between his soul clones and his primordial spirit. The disappearance of the connection meant that something had happened to the demonic corpses. Li Mu stood on the flying boat. After hesitating for a moment, he changed directions and headed straight for the Thousand Fox Nation. Chapter 512. Life Continent, Yao Nation. Between the towering mountains and steep ridges, a huge white dragon flew at a low altitude. Sensing the unique aura of the dragon clan, countless monsters in the mountains trembled. under the pressure of the bloodline, no matter if it was a small monster that had yet to transform or a great monster with a high cultivation base. A deep fear emerged from the bottom of their hearts. Li Mu sat cross-legged on the dragon's head, holding the dragon's horn and exerting a little force in one direction. Cheng Xian understood his meaning and changed direction a little, continuing to fly forward. A real dragon's flying speed was much faster than Li Mu's flying boat. After many days of getting along, Li Mu's relationship with this little female dragon had improved greatly. She was now willing to take the initiative to carry Li Mu. The dragon clan kept their promise. She promised to be his mount for 3 years. Along the way, she really didn't have the slightest intention of escaping. The mountain in front of them gradually became familiar. Li Mu pointed to the tallest mountain in the distance and said, "That's it. Thousand Fox Nation, Imperial Palace." A huge white dragon descended from the sky and landed on the square in front of the palace, causing countless people to be shocked. Soon, more than a dozen figures flew over and surrounded Cheng Xian and Li Mu, who had returned to their human forms. They looked nervous and pointed their weapons at the two of them. The battle was about to break out at any moment. The next moment, when everyone saw who had come, they immediately put away their weapons and cupped their fists respectfully. "Greetings, State Preceptor." Ao Cheng Xian looked at Li Mu, and then at the respectful monsters. She was puzzled. She didn't understand. He was clearly a subject of the Great Zhou. How could he be so respected in the Yao nation? Li Mu looked at a fox demon and asked, "Where's the queen?" The fox demon said, "The queen has been in seclusion for several months. Lord 6 and Lord 9 are in charge of everything in Thousand Fox Nation now." Li Mu said, "Let them come to see me." When they went to invite Hu Lu and Hu Jiu, Li Mu collected the telekinesis from the two statues. After the psyche power merged into his body, the mana in his body increased slightly. The further he cultivated, the more psyche power he needed. The amount of psyche power he could get from daily worship was very little, but it was better than nothing. If Li Mu cultivated by himself, he was afraid that it would take at least 10 days to half a month to have such an effect. Soon, 2 figures flew out from the mountain covered by the spirit gathering array. Hu Lu looked at Li Mu and said in surprise, "Why are you here all of a sudden?" "I'll call the queen out." "No need." Li Mu waved his hand. This time, he didn't come to the Yao Kingdom to have a private meeting with Huan Ji. He had serious business to attend to. He went straight to the point and asked, "Where are the demon corpses I left here?" Hu Lu explained, "Lord Huan Ji left the 2 level 7 demon corpses to guard Thousand Fox Nation. The remaining 8 level 6 demon corpses followed the commanders to subdue the major demon factions." Li Mu could sense the 2 level 7 demon corpses. They were underground in Thousand Fox Nation. Li Mu could vaguely determine the location of the other 8 level 6 demon corpses due to the distance. As for the other 2, he couldn't sense them no matter how hard he tried. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "Contact the commanders with the demon corpses, and ask them about the situation of the demon corpses." Hu Lu and Hu Jiu didn't ask much and quickly contacted the commanders. They could contact everyone except for the 2 demon corpses. Hu Jiu frowned and asked curiously, "Where are Xiong San and Ing Si? I remember that they went to subdue the Black Panther tribe. The Black Panther tribe isn't very strong. Why haven't they responded yet?" Li Mu asked, "In which direction is the Black Panther tribe?" Hu Lu said, "Southeast." Li Mu said straightforwardly, "Give me a map and stay here. Cheng Xian, come with me." The 2 flew up. Hu Jiu sighed softly and said, "Why did he get another dragon to ride? And it's a female dragon. Could it be that the 2 snake beauties can no longer satisfy him?" Hu Lu knocked his head and said, "Don't complain. Go and ask Lord Huan Ji to come out of seclusion." Hu Jiu said, "Didn't you hear what he said? He said there's no need to call Lord Huan Ji." Hu Lu glanced at him and said, "Why do you listen to him so much? If he says there's no need, then there's no need. If he leaves, when Lord Huan Ji comes out of seclusion, you'll be finished." Then she walked toward the depths of the palace, where Lord Huan Ji was in seclusion. At the same time, in the southeast of Thousand Fox Country, Li Mu rode on Cheng Xian and flew slowly at a low altitude. Xiong 3, Ing Si, and the two monster corpses disappeared in this direction. Li Mu followed the mark on the map and headed toward the Black Panther tribe. Not long after, Li Mu and Cheng Xian landed on a mountain top. There were already more than 10 Black Panther demons standing there. One of the Fifth Realm Panther demons knelt on one knee and said loudly, "The Black Panther tribe is willing to submit to Thousand Fox Country. Please take us in, Your Majesty." Li Mu frowned slightly. He looked at the leader of the Black Panther demons and asked, "Have Commander Xiong 3 and Commander Ing Si been here?" Hearing this, the Black Panther demon shook his head blankly and said, "I haven't seen them." Li Mu frowned even harder. Xiong 3 and Ing Si came to subdue the Black Panther tribe, but they disappeared mysteriously before coming here. Judging from the Black Panther tribe's reaction, they didn't seem to be lying. This time, when the power of heaven and earth appeared again, he directly controlled it and easily landed in the small city. In the small city, countless figures looked at Li Mu strangely. Li Mu could tell that they were all demonic corpses in human form. Although these demonic corpses looked at him with surprise, there was no fear or other emotions. After their attention was temporarily attracted by Li Mu, they began to busy themselves with their own matters. Li Mu walked on the street and was out of place with everything around him. What he felt the most about this place was order. Everything was neat and tidy. Everyone had their own duties. Everywhere was filled with order. Even the divine capital did not give Li Mu such a feeling. In this small world, there was a strange power. Li Mu pursued this power and headed to a building at the end of the small city. This building was similar to a temple. The door was open. Li Mu stood outside and saw a prayer mat inside. A figure sat cross-legged on the prayer mat with his back to him. This figure gave Li Mu an inexplicable sense of familiarity. After Li Mu walked in, the figure stood up from the prayer mat and turned to look at him. "Lord Li, how have you been?" Li Mu said in shock. "It's you." The moment he saw Zhou Zhong, Li Mu was not so surprised about what he had seen in the small city outside. Zhou Zhong was undoubtedly a disciple of legalism. It was said that when a cultivator of legalism advanced from the 6th realm to the 7th realm, they needed to establish a country ruled by law. Although this small city was pocket-sized, it matched the description of legalism in the ancient books. No wonder he had only stayed in the army for a few months before leaving. It turned out that he had secretly come here to break through. Li Mu looked at Zhou Zhong and said meaningfully, "Old Zhou, you've hidden yourself well." Zhou Zhong waved his hand and a jade table and 2 jade chairs appeared in the hall. He indicated for Li Mu to sit down and then asked, "Those 2 Yao corpses are yours?" Li Mu said, "That Bear Yao and Eagle Yao are also my people. What did you do to them?" Zhou Zhong grabbed at the air, and 2 figures appeared in the hall. After the 2 men appeared, they immediately ran behind him and said nervously, "Be careful, Imperial Advisor. This person is very strange." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Don't worry. We're old friends." Zhou Zhong moved his finger and poured out 2 cups of tea from the jade pot on the table. The fragrance of the tea permeated the air. He took a sip and asked, "Lord Li, since when have you become the Imperial Advisor of the Yao Kingdom instead of staying by His Majesty's side?" Li Mu said, "It seems that you really don't care about the outside world. The Great Zhou and Thousand Fox Kingdom have formed an alliance and are no longer enemies." Zhou Zhong put down his teacup and said, "It's not that I haven't heard of it. A few days ago, I heard that a human man became the demon empress of Thousand Fox Kingdom. You must be talking about Lord Li, right?" Li Mu waved his hand and said, "It's all a rumor. Don't take it seriously." Zhou Zhong glanced at him and did not continue on this topic. He asked, "Is Qing'er doing well?" Li Mu said, "She's doing well in the divine capital." He then asked Zhou Zhong, "Lord Zhou, you should be breaking through to the 7th realm soon, right?" Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "The upper 3 realms are easier said than done. If you're lucky enough and cultivate for another 30 years, you should have a chance." This sentence seemed to be humble, but it was actually bragging. Zhou Zhong was only 40 years old this year. After 30 years, he would only be 70 years old. A mortal might only be 70 years old, But this was not old for a cultivator. Among the current 7th realm cultivators on the continent, except for the Empress, there was probably no one younger than 70 years old. Moreover, Zhou Zhong's cultivation had been slowly cultivated by himself. He hadn't relied on inheritances or fortuitous encounters. If he reached the 7th level, he would be able to sweep through all the experts in this level. Even if the Lord of Illusions and the Blue Wolf King worked together, they wouldn't be his match. At that time, among the 7th realm cultivators, only the Empress and the sect masters of the various sects would be able to stand up to him. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, Lord Zhou, why don't you return to the Great Zhou and govern the 36 counties and billions of people in the Great Zhou? Isn't that much better than staying in this deep mountain valley? Zhou Zhong said indifferently, with you and His Majesty, the Great Zhou no longer needs me. Li Mu thought for a moment. He was right. The Great Zhou was ruled by law in the first place. Most of the people followed the law. Even if he returned, it would only be icing on the cake. It would not be of much help to his cultivation. A place that could help him in his cultivation would have to fulfill at least 2 conditions. First, a sufficient population. The various cultivation methods in the world all led to the same destination. Whether it was Taoist psychokinesis, Buddhist merit, or the hearts of the people, they all required an extremely large population base. A quantitative change would lead to a qualitative change. It was the same for the school of legalism. How could a small mountain country with only a few hundred demonic beasts compare to the Great Zhou with a population of hundreds of millions? Second, there was no law in this populated place. Or rather, the law had collapsed. Legalism cultivators originally practiced law, drawing power from the process of turning disorder into order. The more chaotic a place was, the more the law collapsed, and the more beneficial it was for their cultivation. For example, during the time of the previous emperor of the Great Zhou, Zhou Zhong's cultivation had probably advanced by leaps and bounds. When everyone thought that he was only at the 5th realm, he had already silently cultivated to the peak of the 6th realm. In general, what he needed to advance was a place with a large enough population and chaotic enough law. Thinking of this, a light suddenly flashed through Mu's mind. He looked at Zhou Zhong and said, I know a place that is more suitable for you than the Great Zhou. The population there is not much less than the Great Zhou. The law there is even more collapsed than the previous emperor's time. It can definitely help you in your cultivation. Chapter 513. Before Li Mu could finish, Zhou Zhong asked directly, Are you talking about the Shen Kingdom? Li Mu nodded and said, Yes, it's the Shen Kingdom. Zhou Zhong rubbed the teacup with his fingers and said lightly, The Shen Kingdom is already a mature country. It's not possible for one person to change such a country. Li Mu said, Just tell me what you need. The Great Zhou will try its best to satisfy you. The Thousand Fox country can also help. Zhou Zhong glanced at him and asked, Can you represent the Great Zhou and the Thousand Fox country? Li Mu said, You don't have to worry about that. This is a win-win situation. You can be promoted, and the Great Zhou can be free of the Shen Kingdom's troubles. Why not? The two looked at each other. Silence was better than 1,000 words. 2 hours later, several figures flew out of the valley. Li Mu rode the white dragon, and the 2 demon corpses carried Xiong 3 and Ning Si. They flew in the direction of the Thousand Fox country. No one was more suitable than Zhou Zhong to lead the people of the Shen Kingdom to freedom and liberation. He needed to be promoted, but it was difficult to do it alone. Li Mu had his own ideas, and he only needed a reliable tool to work for him. The two of them hit it off immediately. When Li Mu approached the Thousand Fox city, a white shadow suddenly flew out of the city. Then, the shadow of a foxtail attacked Li Mu. Li Mu raised his hand and grabbed at the foxtail. A huge palm print appeared in the void and grabbed at the foxtail. When the two collided, Li Mu's palm print collapsed. However, the foxtail's momentum did not decrease and continued to attack him. Li Mu formed another seal and summoned a barrier to block the foxtail's attack. However, in the next moment, a white shadow flew up from the Thousand Fox city and hit Li Mu. Li Mu's body was sent flying. He hurriedly dealt with the attack of the Phantom Princess and said, "Are you crazy?" Phantom Princess did not respond at all. She held two short swords in her hands and continued to approach Li Mu. It was only then that Li Mu realized that something was off. Her strength had increased too much since the last time they met. Based on what she was displaying now, she had definitely surpassed the 5th level. When she launched another fox-tail attack, Li Mu looked at her and indeed found 6 fox tails. She had already become a 6-tailed beast. No wonder she attacked him the moment she saw him. She probably wanted to get back at him. Li Mu struggled to deal with her. If he did not use his mystiques and spells and did not use his Dao Bell, he was naturally no match for a 6th realm cultivator. However, he could not use powerful Dao techniques like the demon-slaying protection curse on Phantom Princess. Li Mu's heart moved, and 2 demon corpses appeared in front of Phantom Princess. Ching Xian, let's go. After that, he turned into a stream of light and flew straight into the sky. Li Mu had a wishful thinking in his heart. If Phantom Princess did not chase after him, it would be good. He would directly return to the South Commandery. This was his plan from the beginning. In the past, her strength was not as good as his, and Li Mu had taken advantage of her a lot. This time, her cultivation had finally surpassed Li Mu's. With the fox's vengeful personality, he would definitely suffer if he stayed here. However, his wishful thinking fell through in the end. Phantom Princess was faster than him. She stretched out her hands, puffed out her chest, and blocked in front of Li Mu. She whispered, "I was wrong. Don't go." Li Mu looked at her. He did not know whether to leave or not. In the end, he flew back. Zhou Zhong still had a few days to take care of the small country. It was fine for him to stay in Thousand Fox Country for a few days, as long as the Empress did not know. As soon as Li Mu returned to the Imperial Palace, the spiritual snail in his storage space began to ring. Perhaps it was because of a premonition. Li Mu made a silent gesture to Phantom Princess. Then he picked up the spirit snail and said, "Your Majesty." It was very lively on the other side of the spirit snail. Li Mu heard the voices of Zhongling, Xiaobai, and Wanwan at the same time. The Empress was obviously in the Li residence. In the courtyard of the Li residence, Zhou held the spirit snail and asked, "Didn't you say that the matter in the South Commandery has been resolved and you will be back soon? Why aren't you back yet? Ling misses you." Li Mu coughed lightly and said, "Regarding the matter of the Shen Kingdom, I have some ideas. If it succeeds, perhaps the great Zhou will never be disturbed by the Shen Kingdom again." Zhou was silent for a while. Then she said, "Be careful. If you need anything, tell me." Although she, like Ling, hoped that Li Mu would come back soon, she also knew that what he was doing now was beneficial to the country and the people. It was related to the Great Zhou and the gathering of the Emperor's qi in the ancestral temple. It was not the time for her to be willful. Li Mu smiled and said, "Your Majesty, don't worry. After I'm done here, I'll return soon." Cough cough. Phantom Princess suddenly covered her mouth and coughed a few times. Then she apologized to Li Mu. "I'm sorry, my throat is a little uncomfortable." Li Mu could clearly feel that the Empress's breathing had become faster. She asked in a deep voice, "Where are you?" Li Mu said honestly, "The Yao Kingdom." Zhou took a deep breath and asked, "The Shen Kingdom is south of the South Commandery. The Yao Kingdom is north of the North Commandery. Are you going to the Yao Kingdom to quell the chaos in the Shen Kingdom?" Li Mu quickly said, "Your Majesty, please listen to my explanation." Zhou said coldly, "Explanation?" Chapter 514. When Phantom Princess opened her mouth, Li Mu's hair stood on end. He covered her mouth and said, "Don't talk so much." Illusion Princess's mouth was covered by Li Mu, so she couldn't speak. She could only mutter, "Mm." The woman's muffled voice entered Zhou Yi's ears. She almost crushed the spirit conch in her hand. She said angrily, "What are you doing?" Lu Hanyan walked over and asked, "Your Majesty, what's wrong?" Zhou handed the spirit conch to her. She gritted her teeth and said, "You have to control your husband." Hearing Lu Hanyan's voice coming from the spirit snail, Li Mu's heart was half at ease. In the past she was unruly, arrogant, and willful, but after marrying him, she slowly began to be reasonable. Li Mu explained the situation to her. After a while, Lu Hanyan put down the spirit conch and said to the Empress, "Your Majesty, you've misunderstood him. There's nothing between him and the Empress of Thousand Fox Country. It's all a misunderstanding." Zhou took back the spirit conch and turned her head. "What misunderstanding? As long as he doesn't betray the great Zhou, he can be with whoever he wants. If you don't care, why should I care?" Lu Hanyan smiled and said, "No matter what, she's still the empress of a country. As long as she's sincere about her husband, I don't care. It's just another sister in the family." Zhou looked at Lu Hanyan. She felt that there was a hidden meaning in her words. In Thousand Fox Country, Illusion Princess's voice had recovered. She looked at Li Mu in shock and asked, "Zhou and your wife are together?" Li Mu glanced at her and said, "Didn't you hear it?" Illusion Princess said in disbelief, "Why are they together? Won't they fight?" Li Mu said, "No, not only won't they fight, they're as close as sisters. You don't have to worry." Illusion Princess gritted her teeth and said, "Worry my ass." She had never expected that Zhou Qiong would get together with Li Mu's wife after she left Luoyang. This made her jealous and hateful. All kinds of emotions mixed together. She returned to her palace. Hulu looked at her and said, "Your Majesty, the Heavenly Monarch wants you to see him." Illusion Princess left the palace and went to the highest cave residence in Thousand Fox Country. She said listlessly, "Father, what's the matter?" The myriad illusion lord sat cross-legged on a stone platform and said, "Li Mu is here?" Illusion Princess said, "Didn't you already know?" The 10,000 illusions god monarch pondered for a moment, then looked at her and asked, "What exactly are you planning?" Princess asked, "Heavenly what?" Heavenly Monarch of Myriad Illusions said, "It's about your relationship with Li Mu." Huanji sighed and said, "What can I do? The Celestial Fox clan always pays their debts. He saved me, you, and my brother time and time again. He made me the Queen of Thousand Fox Kingdom, and helped us deal with the Celestial Wolf clan." He took off his pajamas and covered his body. He asked, "Why are you here so late?" It seemed like there were only 2 people in the room, but there were actually 3 of them. Ling Kong was still under his blanket, and Phantom Princess had come to his room in the middle of the night. If Li Mu hung up now, the Empress would probably think about it for the whole night. Anyways, he was not afraid of anything. This showed that he was magnanimous. Illusion Princess sat beside the bed and asked, "When are you leaving this time?" Li Mu said, 3 days at least, 5 days at most." Illusion Princess frowned and said, "So soon?" Li Mu said, "I just came to see if there's anything here. Since there's nothing, I should leave. There are still important things to deal with in the South region. I can't stay for too long." For Zhou again? Not all. In the past, Li Mu worked for the Empress. Now he worked for himself. However, there was no need to explain to Illusion Princess about the Emperor's aura. However, he didn't say anything. The atmosphere in the hall became awkward again. The awkwardness between 2 people was okay. However, the awkwardness between 3 people was even worse. Li Mu hoped that Illusion Princess would leave quickly. However, Illusion Princess didn't have any intention of leaving. She asked, "How did you meet your wife?" Li Mu asked, "Which one are you talking about?" Illusion Princess said, "2." Li Mu said, "It's a long story." Illusion Princess thought for a while and said, "Then tell me how you fell in love with them." This was not a secret. Li Mu said, "When I was still a small constable, Qingqing was my superior. We were together every day. We caught ghosts together and subdued demons together. Then we fell in love with each other." Illusion Princess remembered this in her heart and asked, "What about Lu Hanyan?" Li Mu said, "At that time we were neighbors. Neighbors walked with each other every day. It's normal for us to fall in love with each other, right?" It would have been better if Illusion Princess didn't mention it. When she mentioned this topic, Li Mu recalled the process of meeting the 2 women in Yangqiu County. Although there were many twists and turns, fortunately, the heavens were good to him. After going around in circles, they returned to Li Mu's side. Illusion Princess continued to ask, "Then when did you fall in love with Zhou Yi?" Li Mu was still immersed in his memories. He murmured, "There's no specific time to fall in love with someone. Maybe it was when we were in Changle Palace." After a long time, Li Mu was halfway through his words when he suddenly realized something. He immediately shut his mouth. Illusion Princess looked at him and was shocked. "You really like Zhou Yi?" Li Mu strode to the bed. He didn't know when the Empress had hung up the spiritual conch. He let out a long sigh of relief. In Changle Palace, Zhou Yi, who had already fallen asleep, walked down the bed and walked back and forth in the bedroom. Her hands tightly held the corner of her nightgown. A trace of red cloud quickly appeared on her face. Chapter 5:15. In the middle of the night, Illusion Princess returned to her palace unhappily and summoned Hulu. She said gloomily, "Li Mu really likes Zhou Yi. If Zhou Yi had taken the initiative, he would have become the Empress of the Great Zhou. I don't understand. We're both Empresses. How am I not as good as Zhou Yi? Is she prettier than me? Does she have a better figure than me?" Hulu shook her head and said, "Her Majesty and the Empress of the Great Zhou are both first-class beauties in the world. In terms of appearance and figure, you can only say that each has her own merits. It's impossible to tell who's better." Then she changed the topic and continued, "However, the Great Zhou is vast and far beyond our thousand-fox nation. Her Majesty can only compete with the Empress of the Great Zhou in terms of status if she unifies the entire demon nation. In addition, the Empress of the Great Zhou is also at the top of the world. She's one realm higher than Her Majesty. Also, Li Mu is at a disadvantage compared to the Empress of the Great Zhou. She has saved Li Mu many times, but we need Li Mu to save us. This is also why you can't compare to her. Stop talking." Illusion Princess waved her hand and interrupted Hulu. She called Hulu over to comfort her. However, after listening to Hulu's words, she felt even worse. After sending Hulu away, she lay on the bed and muttered, "Love grows with time." The next morning, just as Li Mu woke up, two beautiful little fox demons walked in with a tray. The breakfast of the Thousand Fox Nation looked very sumptuous. Li Mu couldn't finish it all by himself. He wanted to ask them to take away a few dishes, but when Illusion Princess walked in and sat at the table, he realized that it was a meal for two. Illusion Princess didn't seem to be here to eat breakfast with Li Mu. She talked a lot with Li Mu about the current problems of the Thousand Fox Nation and the future direction of development. From this, it could be seen that Phantom Princess was different from Empress. She was also the ruler of a country, but she was clearly more competent. Huan Ji bit her chopsticks and said, "Our spies in the Sky Wolf tribe have sent back news that the Sage Sect Elder has already left the Demon Kingdom. Do you think we should take this opportunity to attack the Sky Wolf Kingdom and take over the Sky Wolf Kingdom?" Li Mu took a sip of the fruit drink and shook his head. "It's not time yet. A starving camel is still bigger than a horse. With the current strength of the Thousand Fox Kingdom, it won't be easy to completely capture the Celestial Wolf Kingdom. Not to mention, the Black Snake and Flying Bear tribes are at their peak strength." "Oh." Huan Ji let out an "oh" and dispelled this thought. After a while she said, "Then teach me Fulu and the way of formations. I want to learn." Since he had nothing to do, Li Mu wasn't stingy with these things. In the next 2 days, he taught her talisman formations when he had time. He was originally worried that Huan Ji had other motives and was plotting something, but it turned out that Li Mu was overthinking things. He didn't know when she became interested in Fulu and formations. She actually studied seriously and pestered Li Mu to teach her from morning till night. It was just that her talent was a little lacking. It was fine to draw low-level Fulu, but the failure rate of high-level Fulu was very high. With her cultivation, this shouldn't have happened. Thus, Li Mu could teach her over and over again without getting tired of it. In some ways, she was exactly the same as Ting Xian. She looked smart and quick-witted, but when it came to learning such profound knowledge, Her nature as a poor student was exposed. She was a little stupid, but in the past few days Li Mu also gained a lot from her. The main thing was the ability to resist charm. When Xiao Bai had 5 tails, the charm in her gestures was sometimes something that Li Mu couldn't resist even without the clear heart art. Huanji, a 6-tailed fox, had to change into 3 different sets of beautiful clothes every day. The later it was, the less she wore. Without self-control, he really didn't dare to let her stay by his side. Late at night, in Huanji's bedroom, she stood barefoot on the ground and admired her graceful body in the mirror. After a while, she walked to the table and sat down. She held her chin with one hand and muttered, "How long is a day? Is 10 days enough?" Li Mu and Zhou Zhong had agreed that he would come to Thousand Fox Country to find him after he solved the matter of the small demon country. It wasn't until the 5th day when he was teaching Huanji a new fulu that Hu Jiu came to report that a human was looking for him outside. Li Mu and Huanji walked to the square in front of the palace. Zhou Zhong wore a long robe and stood there. He said to Li Mu, "Let's go." Huanji looked at Zhou Zhong with sullen eyes. Her plan of making love had just started, and was forced to stop. She didn't know when she would have such an opportunity again. Li Mu turned to Huanji and said, "We're leaving." Huanji waved her hand. "Let's go, let's go." It wasn't until the 3 figures disappeared into the horizon that she retracted her gaze and fell into deep thought again. After a while, Huanji suddenly looked at Hu Lu and said, "Tell them to speed up the incorporation of the various demon races." Hu Lu hesitated and said, "But Your Majesty, our territory has already expanded greatly. If we continue, we will clash with the territories of the other 3 races." Huanji said, "How is this considered large? It's even worse than the Great Zhou. Zhou Yi can control half of the Zhu continent. Why can't I control the entire demon country?" Shen Nation, Northern State. After leaving Qianhu Nation, Li Mu and Zhou Zhong went directly to Shen Nation's northern state. Great Zhou had 36 counties, and Shen Nation had more than 20 states. Their states were on the same level as Great Zhou's counties, but they were different. The Great Zhou court firmly controlled the 36 counties, but Shen Nation's states were very independent. Every state was highly autonomous. Other than contributing a portion of taxes to the central government every year, the central government's control over the other states was very weak. Even the people's faith was firmly controlled by the religious sects that controlled the various states. The royal family of Shen Nation couldn't even get a share. This was also the reason why Shen Nation's population was similar to Great Zhou's, but the royal family couldn't produce a 7th realm cultivator. All of Shen Nation's faith was divided among countless religious sects in the various states. Not only could they not get much from the various states, but the central government also had to give these religious sects all sorts of benefits every year in exchange for them to manage the various states, suppress rebellions, and prevent this huge country from collapsing. The reason why this country was able to survive until now and not fall apart was because of these religious sects that had different names, but were of the same origin. They were all branches of the ancient Shen sect. Their names were different, but their teachings were similar. They all divided people into 3, 6, and 9 classes. The upper-class people were served for generations, while the descendants of the lower-class people could only serve the upper-class people. Li Mu had already investigated thoroughly. The one in control of the Shen Nation's northern state was a sect called the Vajra sect. This sect had countless followers in the northern state. The Vajra sect's leader had attained the 6th realm under the support of the northern state's citizens' psychokinesis for decades. Shen Nation's northern state bordered Great Zhou's southern state, so Li Mu chose this place as his target. If he wanted to implement reforms in northern state, the biggest obstacle would be the Vajra sect. He had to solve this problem first. When the 3 of them flew towards the Vajra sect's Mount Vajra, Li Mu felt that this place was slightly familiar. After carefully identifying it, he remembered that he and Cheng Xian had been here not long ago. It was here that they took back Yinxin's inner core from the bald man. As Li Mu and the other 2 approached, a figure flew out from the temple on the short mountain. The bald man looked at Li Mu and Cheng Xian in horror and said angrily, "Didn't I return the inner core to you? Why are you here again?" Li Mu was stunned. He looked at him and asked, "You're the leader of the Vajra sect?" The bald man said in a deep voice, "Why are you looking for me?" Li Mu looked at him and said, "I'm sorry for taking your things last time. This time, I'm here to give you something." The bald man was stunned. He asked, "What is it?" Li Mu waved his hand and threw a small bell at him. The small bell quickly covered the sky and covered the bald man, Li Mu, and Zhou Zhong. Chapter 517. After communicating with the Empress, she asked Li Mu when he would return as usual. Li Mu also wanted to reunite with his family, but the current situation did not allow it. The northern state had just started. The reason why they could achieve so much in such a short time was because they controlled the Vajra sect. It was much easier to force reforms from the top down than from the bottom up. The real difficulty was yet to come. The Shen nation aristocrats in the northern state were strong opponents of the new law. The village elders and other leaders were also unwilling to give up their power. It was difficult for the grassroots to cooperate. Although they did not have much power, they still had the real rulers of the Shen nation behind them. Once they heard the news and reacted, they would definitely send powerhouses to suppress the northern state. He did not expect that the Vajra sect's leader, a sixth realm powerhouse, would be so obedient. Sanggu's Vajra sect had done a great job this time. Li Mu had to make some preparations in advance. He summoned Sanggu and asked directly, "How many seventh realms do you have in the Shen nation?" Sanggu glanced at Li Mu and said, "Nirvana sect, Suffering sect, and Yen sect each have a wisdom realm powerhouse." Ancient Shen nation was the origin of Buddhism. Although ancient Buddhism had disappeared, it still evolved into a few branches. Among them, the Heart sect was a product of Buddhism that spread to the Great Zhou hundreds of years ago. It had nothing to do with the Shen nation's Buddhism. Nirvana sect, Suffering sect, and Yen sect were all in the Shen nation. The Shen nation was the foundation of their believers. Once these three sects interfered, Zhou Zhong alone would not be able to resist three seventh realms. Li Mu still had to make a trip to the Yao nation. The Lord of Illusions had been recuperating for so long. Even if he could not recover to his peak, he had already returned to the seventh realm. The Green Wolf King was no longer a threat. Phantom Princess left a seventh realm demon corpse with her. With the Lord of Illusions, it was enough to protect the Thousand Fox Nation. With the northern states Zhou Zhong and himself. Even if the Shen nation's royal family invited the powerhouses of the three sects, it would be useless. When he returned to the Yao nation this time, Phantom Princess was already in seclusion. Li Mu did not let Hulu disturb her. He quietly took a seventh realm demon corpse and returned to the northern state. Li Mu controlled the airship to fly high in the sky. At a certain moment, he suddenly looked down. Below the clouds, on the ground, a figure was frantically fleeing. Several white-robed men chased after him. The leader of the group held a magic staff and said angrily, "You lowly commoner, how dare you offend your superiors? After I catch you, I'll let you suffer 108 punishments before you die." Aigo flew at full speed. With a natural spiritual body, as long as he did not slack off in his cultivation, it would be easy for him to advance to the sixth realm in the future. When Li Mu suggested that he should lead the commoners of the northern state, Aragu agreed without hesitation. In the Vajra sect, Sanggu had not seen Li Mu for 2 days. He thought that he had left the Shen nation, and was secretly happy. This young man was ruthless and merciless. He almost died in his hands. Seeing him here again, Sanggu felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured over him. The fire that had just been ignited in his heart was extinguished. He originally thought that the central state would not sit by and do nothing with such a huge change happening in the northern state. The new capital would very likely invite the strongest cultivators of the three sects to suppress the rebellion. Then he would be able to regain his freedom after being coerced. However, when he saw the tall figure standing behind the young man, his heart sank completely. The silent figure standing behind the young man had a lifeless aura, and he could not see through him at all. He now suspected that the young man was a 7th realm cultivator. If he was, then the northern state would be completely out of the central state's control from now on. There were only 3 7th realm cultivators in the entire Shin nation. If the northern state had a 7th realm cultivator, they would immediately be on equal footing with the 3 sections. Even the 3 sects would not easily offend them. He looked at Li Mu tentatively and asked, "Sir, this is?" Li Mu looked at him indifferently and said, "Don't ask what you shouldn't ask." Sengu immediately shut his mouth. However, he was almost certain that this young man was undoubtedly a 7th realm cultivator. His future days would be even more bleak. Just as this thought appeared in his mind, he suddenly turned to look into the distance. At the end of the southern horizon, a powerful aura appeared. A bald man wearing a tattered kasaya broke through the air. The man's kasaya was full of holes, and he was barefoot. He did not even have shoes. However, the aura on his body was at the 6th realm. The man rapidly approached the temple, and his voice rolled over. "Sengu, come out and see me." There were not many cultivators in the Shun nation, and they were all familiar with each other. Sengu had already recognized the newcomer. He was Elder Fan Tian of the Ku sect. 20 years ago, he had already stepped into the 6th realm. He was about to bite the bullet and fly up, but another figure was faster than him. The tall man whose cultivation Sengu could not see through disappeared instantly. When he reappeared, he was already high up in the sky, flying towards Elder Fan Tian. Elder Fan Tian snorted coldly and waved his palm forward. His palm rapidly enlarged and pressed down on the tall man. Sengu's throat moved, and he secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. To change the northern state, it will take at least a few decades. We have no enmity with the bitter sect, so we don't have to become enemies with them. To be honest, Li Mu did not have a good impression of the Shun nation, and had no intention of changing it. His great ambition was to bring peace to the Great Zhou, not the Shun nation. However, the Shun nation and the northern state shared a border with the Great Zhou. The stability of the northern state and the southern state of the Great Zhou were the most important. He had already asked Sengu to announce to the public that the northern state would be independent from now on. From now on, the Shun nation and the northern state would become independent countries. The Shun nation and the Great Zhou would no longer share a direct border. The soldiers of the southern army could also live a peaceful and stable life. Since Li Mu had already spoken, Sengu could not say anything else. He inadvertently glanced behind Li Mu and realized that a young man behind him was looking at Li Mu with an extremely respectful gaze. From his clothes and skin color, he should be a lowly citizen of the Shun nation. Sengu's gaze moved away from him and quickly returned back. He was shocked. He stepped in front of Aragu and grabbed his wrist. He muttered, "Such a physique, such a physique." Aragu was shocked. At this moment Sengu spoke urgently. "I am Sengu. Are you willing to acknowledge me as your master?" Everyone in the northern state knew of Sengu's name. He was the belief of the Vajra sect. However, Aragu, whose thoughts had changed, did not respect him. Instead, he was somewhat repulsed. He knelt in front of Li Mu and said, "I want to acknowledge you as my master." Li Mu did not even think about it. He waved his hand and said, "I don't accept disciples. If you are willing, you can acknowledge Sengu as your master. He is more than capable of teaching you." His benefactor was already a godlike existence in his heart. Although he could not acknowledge him as his master, which disappointed Aragu, he did not dare to ask to become his benefactor's disciple. He knelt in front of Sengu and said, "Greetings, master." Everything he had experienced made him understand that he had to have enough strength to protect himself and his loved ones. Only then could he do what he wanted to do. Sengu looked at Li Mu gratefully. Li Mu turned and walked out of the hall. Sengu did not have much lifespan left. To them, no matter how powerful they were when they were alive, it was inevitable that they would return to dust after their lifespan was exhausted. When there was no hope of breaking through in their later years, Many people's greatest wish was to find a disciple to pass on their lifelong knowledge. With Araga's physique, even a 7th-level cultivator would not be able to resist snatching him, let alone a 6th-level cultivator. It was good to have a cultivator like Senga teach him. It would save him a lot of detours on the path of cultivation. Zhou Zhong walked over from afar and said, "I'm not used to the Vajra sex people. When you return to Shindu, transfer Wei Peng over." Li Mu nodded and said, "There's no need to return to Shindu. I can do it now." He took out the spirit snail. After dialing, a sweet voice came from the spirit snail. "Daddy, when are you coming back? Linger misses you." Li Mu smiled and said, "Linger be good. I'll be back soon. Give the spirit snail to your mother. I have something to tell her." Hearing the sound coming from the other side of the spirit snail, Li Mu said, "Your Majesty, when you're free, give a decree to send Wei Peng, the head of the Ministry of Justice, to Shen country's northern state." After talking to the Empress and chatting for a while, Li Mu put away the spirit snail. However, he noticed that Zhou Zhong was looking at him strangely. Li Mu asked, "What are you looking at?" Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "Nothing, Your Majesty." Shen country central state. On a flattened mountaintop, there was a group of magnificent temples that occupied a large area. On the top floor of the tallest pagoda in the group of temples, Brahma put his hands together and said, "Venerable One, this is what happened. If it wasn't for the mercy of that senior, I would have passed away." An old monk sitting cross-legged on a lotus throne with his eyebrows hanging down to his chest slowly opened his eyes and said, "Our foundation isn't in Northern State. Since that's the case, we don't have to care about Northern State anymore." The Ku sect only had one Venerable One, and couldn't afford to offend a 7th realm cultivator. There was no need to offend a 7th realm cultivator for the imperial court. Brahma asked, "If that's the case, how do we explain it to the imperial court?" The old monk said, "Tell them the truth." Brahma bowed and said, "As you wish." Shen country central state, new capital. In the palace hall, the young emperor of Shen country gathered the important officials to discuss the rebellion in northern state. "Your Majesty, don't worry. Elder Brahma has already gone to northern state. I believe the rebellion will be quelled soon. Although I don't know what's wrong with Sengu, he's definitely no match for Elder Brahma. With Elder Fantion here, nothing will happen." While everyone was discussing enthusiastically, an official stumbled in from outside and shouted, "Your Majesty, it's bad. Northern State has sent an urgent message. Northern State has declared independence." Preposterous. The Emperor of Shen country was furious. He pulled out the sword that symbolized power from his waist and pointed to the north. He said, "Send troops, we must send troops. Gather the defense forces and send troops to Northern State immediately." An official advised, "Your Majesty, please calm down. Elder Brahma hasn't returned yet." Chapter 519. Your Majesty is wise. If even the bitter sect doesn't want to provoke them, the other two sects won't easily offend them either. Let's give up on the northern state in exchange for the stability of the other states. The Shen Emperor spoke, and the officials all agreed. A few of them showed hesitation on their faces. Their lips moved as if they wanted to say something, but due to the general trend, they couldn't say anything in the end. The young Shen Emperor put his sword back into its scabbard, waved his hand, and said, "Disperse. Order the northern army to withdraw from the northern state and return to the Mara state. Defend the northern defense line to the death. We can't let them occupy the new state again." The officials obeyed and retreated. The Shen prince paced back and forth in the main hall. He gritted his teeth and said, "The Great Zhou, it must be the damn Great Zhou that's causing trouble." The Shen kingdom and the Great Zhou had hundreds of years of hatred. When the last central dynasty on the Zhou continent collapsed, the Shen kingdom was the most powerful among the countries on the Zhou continent. They wanted to take advantage of that once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to unify the Zhou continent, but the newly established Great Zhou led troops to attack the new capital and almost destroyed the country. That war broke the backbone of the Shen kingdom, causing them to be unable to recover for decades. This was the eternal pain in the hearts of every Shin Kingdom citizen and every Shin royal family member. The dying dream of the previous emperors was to conquer the Great Zhou dynasty and unify the ancestral continent. They originally had this opportunity, but the Shao royal family had already decayed to the extreme in the past few years. The Shen kingdom had secretly prepared for this, and then that woman ascended to the throne. She used 5 years to lead the Great Zhou back to its peak, causing the Shen kingdom's decades of preparation to go up in smoke. The Shen emperor took a deep breath and squeezed out a voice from between his teeth. Venerables and elders? None of them are reliable at critical times. So, Your Majesty, do you want to consider cooperating with us? A voice suddenly sounded. The Shen emperor's expression changed. He looked at a shadow in the corner and said sternly, "Who's there? Come out, Nanjun Great Zhou." Under the towering monument of heroes, the southern army of the Great Zhou and the northern army of the Shen kingdom faced each other across the river. Under the iron fist of official Li, in recent days, no one from the Shen kingdom dared to cross the border and cause trouble. Instead, they faced each other across the river. Shen country's north bank. A stream of light flew over from afar and flew into the Shen country's northern army's tent. 2 hours later, there was a sudden commotion in the northern Indian army, and many people began to move. For hours later, Li Mu brought the women and the empress, who had changed her appearance, to walk on the streets of the divine capital. Ao Ching Xian followed behind the empress step by step, looking like a competent follower. The women were shopping while Li Mu silently absorbed telekinesis. In a short 4 hours, the telekinesis of the people of the divine capital had increased by several times. Lu Hanyan walked in front and asked Ao Ching Xian, "What did you do when you were in the Thousand Fox country?" Ao Ching Xian said, "Nothing. I just cultivated in my room." Lu Hanyan glanced at Li Mu and asked, "What about him?" Ao Ching Xian shook his head and said, "I don't know. My lord stays in the room with that queen every day. I don't know what he's doing." Li Mu raised his eyebrows and immediately explained, "What do you mean you don't know what he's doing? I didn't do anything. If you don't believe me, you can ask His Majesty. I stayed in the Thousand Fox country for a few days to wait for Lord Zhou. In order to promote the stability of the southern border." Zhou snorted and said, "What's the use of asking me? I don't know what you did with that vixen in the room." Li Mu had no choice but to say, "I'm wholeheartedly for the people. Even if you don't believe me, you should listen to the voices of the people." On the streets not far away, there were many people discussing the matter of the Shin country. "I heard that the matter of the Shin country's northern bang was done by Lord Li." "No way." "What do you mean no way?" "Shin country's northern bang became independent, and Lord Li just happened to come back from the southern county. Even if you think with your feet, you know why Lord Li went to the southern county. With Lord Li around, it's a blessing for the people and the Great Zhou." The people chatted for a while, and the topic gradually changed. "Didn't they say that Her Majesty and Lord Li have a child? When does Her Majesty plan to make Lord Li the Empress? I want to know too. We're so anxious. But if that's the case, what about Lord Li's wife?" "That's true, but if Lord Li can't be with Her Majesty, I'm afraid everyone will be upset." Soon no one beside Li Mu spoke. Lu Hanyan was expressionless. Li Qing lowered her head and did not say anything. Wanwan was at a loss. Xiaobai looked at Li Mu and then at Zhou. Li Mu and Zhou looked at each other, and the Empress immediately looked away. Chapter 520. Li Mu heard the cries of the people, but so did Lu Hanyan and the Empress. The Empress was the first to break the awkwardness. She glanced at Li Mu and said, "I still have a few reports to deal with. I will return to the palace first." With that, she turned and walked into the crowd, quickly disappearing. Lu Hanyan also glanced at Li Mu and said, "Go back." Why are you still standing here? Do you want to hear the cries of the people again? Life was full of surprises. If Li Mu knew that this would be the case when he returned to Shen capital, he would rather stay in the Shen kingdom for a few more days and do his part to liberate the oppressed people of the world. As expected, Lu Hanyan went to sleep with Li Qing that night. This meant that Li Mu would have to sleep alone in the study. In Li Qing's room, the two of them were still awake. They called Wan Wan and Xiaobai to play cards together. Ever since they no longer needed to cultivate, they had more things to do for entertainment. Li Qing glanced in the direction of Li Mu's study, and then looked at Lu Hanyan. She hesitated and said, "He just came back. It's not good for us to do this, is it?" Lu Hanyan looked at her and asked, "He is our husband. Why would the people say such things? Are you not angry at all that you want them to be together?" Li Qing only smiled and said, "Sister, didn't you accept Her Majesty long ago? Why don't you tell him directly?" Lu Hanyan snorted and said, "Wouldn't that be letting them off easy? I won't say anything. I want to see how long they can pretend to be stupid for. Anyway, it's quite fun to watch the show." Then she glanced at Li Qing and said, "You are not allowed to say it either. You are not his leader now. Don't try to protect him every time." Li Qing could only nod. Lu Hanyan then looked at Xiaobai and Wan Wan. The two girls immediately promised. Li Mu was lying on the bed in the study. He had a lot on his mind and couldn't fall asleep. Suddenly, he heard a creak in his ear. The window of the study room was pushed open, and a petite body got into his bed. Xiaobai mysteriously whispered into Li Mu's ear, "Benefactor, let me tell you a secret. Don't tell Sister Lu that I told you." Li Mu was puzzled. "What secret?" Xiaobai leaned close to Li Mu's ear and whispered, "Sister Lu agreed to you and Sister Zhou a long time ago. She said that she wanted to see how long you guys could play dumb for. She wanted to watch the show." After Li Mu came back to his senses, he kissed her hard on the cheek. In this family, Xiaobai would always be his sweet little jacket. Although Lu Hanyan had expressed such thoughts several times, as the first wife of the Li family, if she didn't make it clear, no one would dare to act blindly without thinking. Since he knew what she was thinking, Li Mu didn't have anything to worry about. The next morning, he ate breakfast and went to Changle Palace as usual. The Empress wasn't there. Only Mr. Mei was. She was very familiar with the place in the image. It was her imperial garden. In the midst of the flowers, Li Mu was holding a woman's hand. They were admiring the flowers. He dared to take another woman to her imperial garden in his dream. Zhou Yi was angry. She was about to disturb Li Mu's beautiful dream. However, when she looked up and saw the woman's face, her body couldn't help but tremble. The woman Li Mu was holding hands with in the imperial garden in his dream was none other than herself. The anger in Zhou Qiong's heart instantly disappeared without a trace. His eyes were filled with joy and anticipation as he stared at the scene in the sky. Even his breathing slowed down. At this time, the sound of footsteps came from outside Changle Palace. Mr. Mei and Sheng Guanli walked in. Zhou Yi immediately dispelled the image and sat up straight. However, her eyes swept over Li Mu from time to time. She was extremely curious about what he was dreaming about. Mr. Mei and Sheng Guanli walked into Changle Palace. The sound of footsteps suddenly woke Li Mu up. He sat up straight and looked at the Empress guiltily. He was about to continue reading when Zhou Yi suddenly asked, "I saw that you were sleeping soundly. What did you dream about?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I didn't dream about anything." Mr. Mei glanced at him and said, "Ali and I were standing outside the hall. We saw you smiling. How could you say you didn't dream about anything?" Li Mu smiled embarrassedly and said, "I dreamed about my wife." Zhou Yi's face turned red for no reason. She quickly returned to normal and said, "Changle Palace is stuffy. Come with me to the Imperial Garden. Ali Mei Wei, you two stay here and tidy up." Li Mu stood up and said, "As you wish." Sheng Guanli took a few deep breaths as she tidied up the imperial desk. She asked, "Is it stuffy here? And His Majesty just came back from the Imperial Garden." Mr. Mei glanced at her and said, "Hurry up and do your work. Why do you have so many questions?" In the Imperial Garden, Zhou Yi walked in front. She was in a good mood and had a smile on her face. Li Mu followed behind her with a faint smile on his face. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.